you're going to teach us some negotiation.
Yeah.
So what qualifies you to teach us some negotiation? I mean, you're a negotiation teacher, but aside from that,
Right,
aside from that triviality.
Yeah, this was funny. I've built my career kind of building and scaling tech startups in the Bay Area here. And one of the really nice things about working at a startup is that you end up having to do a lot of different things very quickly under in extreme emotional duress, let's put it that way. So I got into a place where I was basically building businesses through business development, so large contract negotiation. So a big part of what I did for the beginning of my career was pretty much negotiation focused. And through that developed just a different outlook on it than a lot of the folks that I was working with. And that worked out really well for the companies that I was kind of leading and working with. And then I got asked by other companies to come in and help them negotiate things and develop this like significant sample set of just all these different scenarios of negotiation. And then I started teaching it. And the cool thing about teaching, and the reason that I teach really, is that I get to learn from other people's stories about negotiation. And one of the best ways to kind of sharpen your skill set if you're a practitioner is to have to teach things to other people. So a lot of what I've learned to date is a compendium of not only my own experience kind of extensively in my own career, but other people's experiences, sharing their stories, helping them work through their issues. So it's quite a decent scope at this point.
All right. So what are we going to walk away with here? It's not just, it doesn't sound like it's just going to be this academic study of negotiation. Because I remember when I went to law school, they taught us some negotiation tactics, and it was like, always start the first offer because anchoring. And everyone's like, whoa, this is really important. And then after that, it kind of got even worse. It was more like, always go in there and be on time and just sit at the one end of the table.
Shake their hand and look them in the eye.
Look them in the eye. Firm handshake. And
wear a power tie.
Things like don't drink too much water because if you leave to go to the bathroom, it looks like a weakness. And I'm like, this is a person who read a book once on negotiation that was written in 1924.
Right, yeah. The Donald Trump art of making the deal.
Right.
Yeah. It's funny. Everybody always asks me when I teach these classes what books I would recommend for negotiation. But I almost never recommend books, primarily because negotiation is such a human experience that ideally today what we're going to walk through are things that you can walk away and try today. In something that you're doing, as opposed to the deep theory of negotiation. While that stuff can be really interesting and a great basis for learning how to do this stuff better, it's not ultimately as useful. So the way that I teach this course is that I want people to walk away with very tactical things that they can say. So turns of phrase, specific, visual or physical cues, things you can just say in a negotiation. So it's not, again, we're divorcing it a little bit from the theory, although that's a very useful way to look at negotiations is it provides a good baseline for understanding some of the things that even you're doing on your own. We want this to be super tactical. So do this, don't do this. Do this, don't do this.
Perfect. That's what we like here. Practicals, takeaways, things people can use, and stuff that actually works based on experience instead of just theory that someone thought of. I know that you've probably seen this. This is a little tangent here, but there was a tweet by, I think it was Ari Paul, and I can't remember exactly where he works, some VC fund, and he said he'd overheard some other VCs saying things like, we're deliberately going to be 30 to 60 minutes late for every meeting because it signals importance and power. And he had tweeted this, and he was like, what is happening with you people? Like, this is ridiculous. And people were in the comments, of course, being like, this is, I know tons of people that do this, or, oh, this is everything that's wrong with VC today.
It is. I mean, that kind of stuff, or like transparent power plays, are, in my opinion, a relic of looking at negotiations incorrectly. People look at them as like it's a zero-sum game, win versus lose, that kind of thing. But in reality, that leads to bad outcomes stretched out over a series of negotiations. I think, in a point-to-point basis or an individual case, if you walk in and you're like, I'm going to kill, I'm going to win, I'm going to intimidate the other side, I'm going to get all the things I want, you can do decently because you're able to get over that first hurdle, which we'll talk about later, of just being able to ask for things because you've already decided you're going to. But that's really the only benefit you get from that mindset, in my opinion. Negotiations, when done correctly, are an incredibly empathetic, mutual conversation that happens, and it's a negotiation of two sides with individualistic interests that I'm trying to bring together in a way that feels constructive for everybody. It is not me going in and winning or me going in and intimidating you or screwing you over.
Gotcha. Okay, and I think that's important, and that's a really good fit for the things that we teach on the Jordan Harbinger Show and at Advanced Human Dynamics, because we don't want to leave people thinking this is a terrible experience, doing business with them is awful, I'm just glad it's over.
Yeah.
Right? We want people to think, okay, well, we negotiated this and I'm happy to be moving forward, not, wow, that burned and I can't wait until this thing is expired.
Yeah, thank God that I'll never see these people again.
Right.
Yeah. The Webster's definition of negotiations, it's a mutual discussion and arrangement of terms of a transaction or agreement. which sounds like a really simple
That's really
banal
sexy
sentence.
and romantic.
It
the way
is.
they do that.
That's the sexiest part of the class. It's
Yeah.
all downhill from here. But in reality, if you unpack that a little bit, it's a mutual discussion and arrangement of terms of a transaction. It's not me going in and getting what I want. It's not me just advocating for my own self-interest. It's me learning about the other side. And actually, one of the only books that I recommend on negotiations called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss.
Chris Voss, yes.
Yeah. Has he been on your show?
He has, yeah.
Yeah, he's a great book. And to be honest, I've only read about 60% of it, but that's what I do with every book, so that's not specific to this one.
Well, hopefully you just skipped the beginning because it was really good.
But yeah, I mean, he uses a phrase called tactical empathy. And I've been teaching this class for years and years, saying basically the same thing in different words, but I like the way he phrases it. Negotiations are about the use of tactical empathy.
Okay, so tactical empathy being empathy deployed in some way that's strategic towards the outcome of the negotiation?
Exactly.
Okay.
That's exactly
I can hang with that.
So one of the things that I throw up at the beginning of my class is this kind of chart. And obviously not everyone can see it here, although we can post on the website afterwards.
This chart that you don't see right now.
So close your eyes. No, so in this chart, there's basically two inverse curves. It's a pain and a progress curve. And I throw this up at the beginning of a negotiation class, although if I was teaching intro to piano or trumpet, I would use the same chart because it's the same basic concept. Is that when you're learning a new skill of any kind, whether, again, it's a musical instrument or a sport or negotiation, at the beginning, your progress is as fast feeling as it will ever feel, primarily because you're starting from zero. Like in Silicon Valley, it's very famous, startups will go and say like, well, we had 10,000% revenue growth last month. And I was like, great, well, you had $1 in revenue the month before, and now you have $10,000 revenue.
Right.
So it's not really, it's a false view of things. But the reality is that proportionately at the beginning, it feels like you're growing as fast as you ever are. And that's the benefit. So if you're learning negotiations today, if you kind of embark on your journey of getting better at this stuff, maybe you've already started on this, you are getting better as fast as you will ever get. Because you're learning the basics and you're beginning to deal with discomfort. And then eventually, if you keep going and that curve begins to flatten off as it reaches the top, you're finding your style, you're polishing your technique. And eventually, if you stick with it long enough, you're just playing with people. That's what I do now.
Okay. But is that a good thing? It sounds kind of like it could go either way.
Yeah, you just get bored. It's the same thing. I think, really, really good soccer players, for instance, are really good at doing trick stuff because they're bored and they're just kicking around to see how far they can take their skills. But I'll just say things in negotiations to destabilize people sometimes just to see how they react, primarily just because I'm bored and I've done this a lot.
Can you give us an example of something that destabilizes, or is that something we're getting into later?
Yeah, it's interesting. This is going to sound slightly rough, but sometimes I do it in job offer scenarios. So if somebody negotiates with me, let's say I'm offering someone a job, and they come back with a counter, I may say something slightly destabilizing like, really, you think you're worth that? Interesting. And I'll immediately back off that and just
zing.
Go. I just want to see who I'm dealing with in some
right.
cases.
Okay.
Now I don't mean that to be mean. I'll make nice afterwards.
Yeah.
But seeing people's emotional reaction to something can also tell me how deeply engaged they are or married to that idea versus like if they're fishing for something else. So sometimes I'll just throw a little grenade in the water and test people. Now, so back to the curve. So at the top, there's this progress curve that, again, grows and then flattens off over time. Again, at the beginning, I'm getting as good as I will ever get, proportionally as fast as I will ever be at negotiations. Now, on the inverse is the pain curve. When I start learning anything, pain is at an all-time high because I've never done it before. If I'm learning to play trumpet for the first time, it sounds like ass. People are telling me to go practice in the forest somewhere, get out of my house, that kind of thing. The pain is enormously high because it sounds terrible.
Sure.
And another way that I believe Ira Glass put this was that at the beginning of learning any skill, there's where your taste is, which is really high up, and where your actual physical ability to execute is, which is really low. And the distance between those two things is just pure pain.
Right.
That's what it is learning anything. And with negotiations, it's the same. So at the beginning, you're progressing really fast, but your pain is as high as it will ever be. Now, over time, as you do things more, your pain will level out. It will go down, your pain level, and it will begin to level out and never quite hit the zero axis, never quite go away, because no matter how much you do stuff with negotiations, you're always testing the social fabric when you ask for things that you want, which we'll get back to later. But the point here is that the pain will never go away. So if you want to get good at something, you need to internalize the idea that you have to embrace the suck. And it's the same with negotiations. It will be painful at the beginning as you're trying to get good at this stuff, but you'll be progressing really quickly. You just got to stick with it.
That's good to know because I think a lot of people, negotiation and sales kind of dovetail nicely where people go, well, I don't want to seem salesy. There's no such word as negotiation-y, but it does apply.
Yeah.
People don't want to negotiate their salary or, for that matter, anything. They don't want to barter or bargain with a cab driver. at a restaurant or something like that, where they feel they're actually being they know they're being ripped off.
Yeah.
And they won't say anything. Well, I don't know. It's, I don't want to make waves. Or they don't even say that. They just know that the conflict is so uncomfortable that they won't do it.
Yeah.
And that's the reason I think that a lot of people bring a friend with them when they're negotiating to buy a car.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done that for mostly female friends, and we'll get into that in a little bit, where I'll go to the dealership and she just knows, look, when I come here alone, they just try to pull the wool over my eyes because they think I'm a dumb gal. But also, she doesn't want to say, this is too much. Yeah. She knows that I can do it because I'm a jackass, and that's why we're friends, right? Or she phrases it more nicely, of course, like, well, you're a lawyer, you're used to this. But the translation really is that I'm not afraid to do this. But this was a learned skill. Yeah. I didn't grow up as a kid going, I can't wait to get into a adversarial relationship with somebody potentially at a car dealership.
You've keyed into something really important, and that's one of the fundamentals, which we'll talk about more in a moment, but it comes back to social costs. And what you're talking about there is you are all of us are very implicitly aware of the social contract. Mm-hmm. When we are engaging with other people in a value exchange, we're very aware of their needs and wants. We're aware of ours, even if we're not aware that we're aware of their needs. We are. It's just pre-programmed in us living in a modern society. And so it makes it very difficult for us to advocate for our own self-interest because we have trouble putting those interests at least at par with other people's interests.
Sure.
And there's a lot of ways you can combat that, which we'll talk about.
When you say the social contract, can you define that just in one or two sentences? Because I think a lot of people might go, oh yeah, wait, what is that?
Yeah. So society largely is a compendium of rules and customs that are designed to effectively protect social order. And so the social contract defined, if you Google the word, it's an implicit agreement among the members of a society to cooperate for social benefits. An example, by sacrificing some individual freedoms for that protection of living in a society. Mm-hmm. So put in plain speak, basically what that means is that I'm willing to sacrifice some of my own needs for the greater good because the greater good pays back to me in dividends.
Okay. So we don't want to just be totally individualistic in some points. And so this is hard-coded into us, would you say?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, the social contract is hard-coded into us from birth, effectively. Now, some of us deal with that better ways than others. And one of the phrases du jour right now for behavioral psychologists is this trait called agreeableness. How agreeable are you as a person? If you're very agreeable, you tend to put your needs below other people's needs. You tend to be more equilibrium focused. I just want to keep things on an even keel. If you are less agreeable, you're more comfortable advocating for your own self-interest. It's not as painful to you to kind of test and twist that social fabric for your own purposes. Now, taken to an extreme is like a sociopath who completely doesn't give a damn about twisting or breaking or violating that social fabric really openly and painfully.
That makes sense. Yeah. We study a lot of psychopaths and sociopaths on the show. And whenever people give examples of, well, this is hard-coded, I'm thinking, well, there's going to be some people who actually see that that's hard-coded and just take advantage of it. But it is
absolutely
rare.
Yeah.
This is a learned skill, right? So I think a lot of people think, oh, well, I'm not good at this naturally. I'm not naturally good at this because maybe they're conflict averse.
Yeah. I hear that all the time, and it absolutely kills me. Mm-hmm. When teaching negotiations, I'll often have people come into the class and say, well, I'm just not good at talking. Or I just get really nervous in negotiating scenarios, and it's just who I am as a person. And I'm trying to just get a little bit better, but I know I'm always going to be terrible at it.
Oh, that sucks.
It kills me. It's a defeatist attitude. And I understand where that comes from, for sure. We're all insecure about the areas where we think we need to improve. But one of the things that I walk through in my classes is something that I call the Rudy curve, or the Rudy pyramid. Now, at the bottom of the pyramid the pyramid basically tells us how effective or how good people are at a particular skill. At the bottom of the pyramid, meaning people who are the worst at something, are people who have no inherent talent. Maybe they're not born with that particular skill, or who they are as a person is kind of counter to doing that thing well, and they're lazy. So these are people who don't naturally have that imbued kind of blessed skill. They're not an amazing soccer player to begin with, but they're incredibly lazy and they don't work hard. These are people who are as shitty as anyone could possibly be at whatever they're trying to do. Now, leaps and bounds above that, kind of in the pyramid, are people who may have naturally imbued talent. Maybe they're born to do this, they're naturally good athlete or something like that, but they're lazy as well. So they don't work hard. So really, like, those people are above people who have no talent or are lazy, but actually not that far. Now, above that are people that have no talent and are hardworking. Now, professional sports are filled with people who weren't necessarily given athletic gifts, maybe weren't super tall or super fast or super strong, lots of muscle, but they worked their asses off. And you see this constantly. Look at Muggsy Bogues, famous point guard in the NBA. Tiny guy. He's like 2'5", but he was an absolute monster on the court because he worked harder than almost anybody. And this is what I call the Rudy level. This was, if you've seen the movie Rudy, this tiny little guy, his dream was to play on the Notre Dame football team. And he kept getting the shit kicked out of him in practices and tryouts and never made it. And eventually just worked so hard, he got onto the team and kind of fulfilled his dreams. It's a beautiful
While
moment.
everyone was chanting.
Exactly. Rudy, Rudy. It was an absolutely beautiful moment. If you don't cry at that, God help you. But above that are the people who have talent and work their asses off. These are the Cristiano Ronaldos, the Michael Jordans, the LeBron James. These are people that you will almost never meet. They're one in millions and millions. And if you do meet them, God help you.
You're embarrassing me. You're embarrassing me.
I know.
But continue.
You're uncomfortable with the word hero. I got it. Yeah.
Yes.
No, but it's true. I mean, you rarely ever meet people like this. So the point of this curve is, again, at the bottom are people that have no talent and are lazy. A little bit above that are people who have talent and are lazy. Leaps and bounds above that are people that may not have that natural talent but work their ass off. And then the top of the pyramid is people that have that talent and work their ass off. So the message here is that hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard every single time.
So hopefully everyone listening to this is somewhere between the talent and hard work top of the pyramid. If that's you, congratulations. Or the no talent, hard work level. Or possibly the talent plus lazy, but then actually trying to get a taste of the work ethic. If you're at the bottom, you probably don't listen to this show because it's probably boring and you're looking for something you can listen to while you play video games.
Yeah, I mean, your show focuses on skill development. So the fact that someone's listening to this show in the first place is like a positive step in that direction that they want to develop in some meaningful way. So yeah, I would say, most of the people that we're talking about here are probably in the middle two tiers.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. So everyone's terrified of negotiation. We've kind of covered that. All right. What else?
Yeah, so when you start a negotiation, so when I talk about the fundamentals of how to get good at this stuff, so now we've done the intro, let's get into the fundamentals, is that your first problem will be your perspective. That's true with everybody. And as you mentioned just a second ago, everybody is terrified of negotiations.
Yeah.
When we are twisting that social fabric, it creates pain for us. So for most of us, the hardest part is asking. We just can't get to the point where we do. A very large percentage of the pay gap between men and women in the workforce is defined by the fact that women very infrequently negotiate relative to men. I've heard estimates as high as 60-some% of women, what's the statistic? 1 second. I think it's women are about 60% as likely to negotiate for a job offer as a man is. And that's really, really unfortunate. It's one of the areas that I work very closely with my students on is getting over this part of rationalizing and being comfortable making an ask. And so in order to do that, you have to recognize why those things happen. Why is it hard for us to ask the things we want? Well, the first part is we don't know what we're missing. So one of the examples that I pull up in front of my students in class is I pull up Excel and I basically run through 3 different scenarios. Let's say there's 3 people, Andrew, Betsy, and Charlie. They all graduate from the same college with the same degree and go into the same job immediately afterwards. They are the same in every single way. The gender difference here is just to make things sound equal. But let's say that that's immaterial for here. Now, each one of them gets the average exiting salary for someone coming out of college right now is around $47,000, $48,000. But let's just round up to 50 for easy sake. So each of the 3 of them gets offered the same job for $50,000 out of college. Now, Andrew doesn't negotiate his job. Gets $50K, takes $50K, that's his salary, he starts. Now, Betsy negotiates her job and does pretty decent. She gets somewhere in the neighborhood of a 12% increase, which is pretty normal case for someone who negotiates a job offer scenario. So she walks away with $56K. And then Charlie does the same thing. Charlie negotiates that job as well, and he gets $56K. So now, let's say over the course of your career, you're going to be working somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 or 42 years. That seems to be the average. You're going to retire when you're 65. So for each one of these, the first salary that I start out is my starting place, right? That's where all the salaries, everything that I do for the rest of my career starts in that one first place. So for Andrew, who didn't negotiate at all, gets $50K. Let's just say over the course of his career, 42 years working, he gets an average 3% a year cost of living adjustment. So over the course of his career, he's going to make somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 million. That's his total career earnings if he adjusts that salary up every year. Now, for Betsy, who negotiated her first job offer and got $56K, she only negotiated that one offer that one time in her entire career. So she started at $56K, Andrew started at $50. They both get the cost of living adjustment every year. So for Betsy, just because she negotiated that one time over the course of her career, she will make about $500,000 more in her life than Charlie will. That's the benefit of that compounded effect of that one negotiation, one time. That's it. Now, let's look at Charlie, the third one. So Andrew never negotiates. Betsy negotiates once and does 500K better in her career. Charlie is now going to negotiate every single time he switches jobs. Now, let's say on average, person switches jobs every 7 years. And every single time Charlie switches jobs, he's going to negotiate for better. And let's say he has the same outcome he did the first time, a 12% increase. So if he's negotiating his job that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times over the course of his career, every 7 years or so, he's going to make $1.985 million more than Andrew did.
So someone's entire retirement,
Yeah.
healthy retirement, $2 million. Well, maybe that's not healthy in 42 years, but
Right.
for now, that would be quite healthy.
Yeah. And if
That's
you put that in
all
an
handled.
interest-bearing savings account,
Right.
I mean, that's going to be significantly more and can definitely fund your retirement. But the point here is that most people are not aware of the downstream effects of not negotiating for things. They don't think about the consequences of not having negotiated that salary one time forever.
Right.
Now, a lot of people in my class feel super bad about this. When I mention it, it's like, oh, shit, I
Because they're
didn't
40.
negotiate.
Like
Exactly.
They're pushing 40 like me at 38, and they're going, oh, man.
It's like, I didn't negotiate my first job.
I should have $500,000 more by now.
Exactly. But the point is that when you make these decisions or they're made for you, the compounding effects of those things are significant. You don't see them. They're insidious and they're really, really bad. So sometimes when we get into negotiations, when we're trying to get ready to do them, I talk about the power of rationalization. You need to rationalize your way into negotiating. This is one way to power your rationalization. Well, if I don't negotiate here, what does that mean for me if I don't do this kind of thing later on? What could I do with that money had I negotiated the first time? So that's one. But let's talk about rationalization for a second.
Sure.
Rationalization is both one of the best tools that humanity has ever invented and one of our worst enemies.
Sure.
It can get us over the hump negotiating, and we'll talk about how to do that in a second. It can also help us rationalize doing terrible things.
That's why rationalization is why I had pizza last night at 9 p.m. for dinner instead of just going to bed hungry.
Because you worked out, you're like, now I can eat this entire cake.
Yeah, kind of something like that.
Yeah, moral licensing. It's a very common thing that you run into in behavioral psychology.
It's even worse when you know you're doing it in the moment and you just don't care as the deliciousness slides down.
That makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, it's a problem though, because and if you don't know what's happening, it's your worst enemy. It will dictate essentially your whole life.
Yeah, I mean the entire National Socialist movement in Germany, the Nazi movement, was an entire country or a very large number of people rationalizing very difficult and insane things in some cases because they felt as though they had gotten a really raw deal from World War I, and there were all kinds of things culturally happening inside the country that made it easy for people to rationalize to us today unimaginable things. But that happens to us every day in our lives. Like, I worked out a little bit, I'm going to eat this cake, right? But that can be used for our benefit in negotiations. So one of the ways that we can rationalize being more comfortable asking for things is the foregone revenue conclusion, like we talked about a moment ago. The one that I use personally, and this is kind of my secret sauce for negotiations, can we curse in this, or is this?
Sure. Yeah.
Is that whenever I get an offer, every first offer that comes to me, be it for a job offer negotiation, a price for a vendor contract I'm negotiating, is a fuck you price. That is somebody who has priced me, and they're giving me a number for what they think they can get me for, what they think I'm worth. So they're pricing me, and that irritates me. So I walk through the negotiation, or I walk into it with the sense that I have to defend myself against this imposition from somebody else. It makes it very easy for me to rationalize asking for the things I want. It makes it very difficult for me not to do that.
So you're kind of getting fired up a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm getting a little pissed off.
Yeah.
Now, that's dangerous, and it doesn't work for everybody because sometimes we can go too far with that.
Yeah,
and we
you're
can
on
feel
tilt.
like, exactly, the other person screwed me over. Who do you think you are? And then that can come through in inflection and word choice. And don't do that. That's bad. You don't want to come out pissed off swinging, which does happen.
You see, Mike Tyson, he would get fired up before a fight. You turn it up to 11.5 instead of 11.
Yeah.
You eat someone's ear.
Exactly. Yeah. No eating of ears.
No eating of ears.
Yeah.
Really bad negotiation tactic, especially.
It's a good rule of thumb. So another one is, so one, foregone conclusion or foregone revenue. The second is the fuck you price. And the third often one is emulation. So just think of somebody that you respect, like Beyonce, right? Let's just say Beyonce's
absolutely.
Queen Bee, right? Would Beyonce negotiate for what she wants? Would Beyonce take the first offer? What would she do? It could be an athlete. It could be a business person you respect. It could be your parents, your boss, somebody around you that you know, again, would advocate for their own best
Charlie
interest.
Sheen would negotiate this.
That's right. Charlie Sheen would destroy this situation.
Yeah, he would.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right about that.
Just a Coke-fueled negotiation rampage.
Exactly.
Exactly. So yeah, that first part there is, again, using and leveraging the power of rationalization to get over that hump of asking for what you want. That's so huge. The next one that I talk about a lot in the class is the role of empathy. Really, when you're teaching negotiations, it's effectively a class in empathy. And like we talked about before, tactical empathy. The importance of that cannot be overstated. Good negotiators, great negotiators, are intensely empathetic. They not only understand the other side, but they understand how they're evaluated, what their wins and what their losses look like, what their goals, their hopes and dreams, their worst nightmares look like. All of these things are tools in your tool belt to effectively negotiate. And some use it for good, some use it for naughtiness. If you take empathy too far, it becomes blackmail. I know exactly where your pressure points are, so I'm going to push on them. I'm going to make you feel really insecure. That's obviously taking it too far, but that's really tactical empathy.
That's funny. You never really think of empathy as being negative at all.
Yeah.
It's only really used in the sense of, oh, he's so empathetic. He really understands people and feels their pain and understands them and is kind. It's really never used for, wow, he's so empathetic that he took advantage of everybody's weaknesses.
Blackmail the hell out of
Yeah, but again, going back to psychopathy, psychopaths don't necessarily have a lack of empathy. They, in many ways, they can use that to their advantage. They just have a lack of morality in some cases. Going back
complete
to
lack of sympathy. Yeah, absolutely.
Sympathy, exactly.
Yeah. So that's huge. So we're going to keep coming back to that theme over the course of this conversation because it's so important. It's the thread that ties everything together. The next thing, and one of the most important parts of negotiations as well, and we'll talk about this more directed a little bit later, is the power of prework. So you need to internalize the idea that the better prepared person almost always wins in a negotiation. I negotiate for a living. I've been teaching this stuff for years, but if I'm going up against somebody who knows all the inputs and outputs of a situation and has really done their homework and I haven't done any of it, I am at a significant disadvantage no matter how comfortable I am doing it in the first place. So that's huge. So in a negotiation, we actually walk through, in the pre-work side of things, there's actually a worksheet, which we'll put up on the site that everyone can take a look at, that walks through all the things that you need to know walking into a negotiation. So effectively, I have my students kind of print this worksheet out, but it runs through a couple different things. Number one, what am I negotiating? That's the basic stuff. What's the timeline in which I need to make a deal by? Do I need to give this job offerer an answer by the end of the week? Because then that changes my decision criteria, how I'm going to do things. Then it goes through the party involved. And these are the most important things in the worksheet. This is where we stalk people on Google. This is where we learn as much as we can about who they are and what they want. What does that person do that I'm negotiating with? Let's say it's a business-to-business contract. Who does that person report into? How are they evaluated? How do they get their bonus? What is their boss looking for? Who are they going to have to sell this to other folks? When I meet people in a business scenario, I ask two questions always. One is, what does a win look like for you? What are you driving towards? What's important to you? And the second is, what keeps you up at night? What's your worst nightmare? And I've built a couple digital consultancies over the years. And ironically, whenever I ask clients or prospective clients that question, just a side note, it's a lot easier to sell them on taking the pain away than it is giving them what they want. Even if I could devise a strategy or give them a service that would make all their goals come true or goals get achieved, they tend to not believe it. But they're much more likely to believe that I can make the pain stop. So often when consultants sell clients, they're selling them on making pain stop, which is really interesting.
That is interesting. I think we know that, though, from general humanity, right? That we will go through lengths to avoid pain rather than seeking pleasure or doing something right. We'll choose short-term pain avoidance in almost every case.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, the parties involved. So that's really, really important. Another thing that we want to make sure we understand about them in the same worksheet is what their Batna is. Now, Batna is an acronym that you pretty much only hear in negotiation conversations, but it stands for Best Alternative to Negotiated Agreement. So that means that if they don't do a deal with me, they're going to do a deal with someone else. I need to know who those people are. For instance, if they are going to buy something from me, they don't buy it from me, they'll buy it from these four competitors. So understanding who I'm compared to, again, helps me pitch against those things, helps me create a differentiation for what I'm offering relative to what their other options are.
Yeah, that's good. I do that sometimes, or I have done that in the past when selling corporate training programs.
Yeah.
And going, oh, well, who else are you looking at? Sometimes it's as simple as asking.
Yeah.
And oftentimes the person will say, no one. We're either going to get this from you or we're not going to get it at all.
Yeah.
Or they'll say, well, we're looking at you and we're also looking at this Dale Carnegie course. And it's like, oh, okay, I can probably disassemble anything that they have taught there by having taken that course myself. And then kind of picking out why it would be the absolute wrong decision for everything that you guys are looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, these guys. Here's 5 reasons why they suck.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or they're decent. I won't badmouth a competitor. However, here's a million other reasons why we are 10,000 times better.
Exactly.
Even though we're much more expensive.
But if that's how they're making their decision, that's so crucial to be able to do that. So the next thing is your interests. Now, this is really interesting. There's a reason that I put this in the worksheet. It's important for you to understand what you're trying to achieve. Now, sometimes that seems like it's really obvious, but often it isn't. There's a lot of reasons in negotiations that you do deals that may not be just about the money, for instance. As a business person, you may do a deal with a competitor for a strategic relationship, to develop a relationship with someone else that they work with, for brand value, for control terms of your own company or a new term. There's all kinds of reasons why you want to do a negotiation. It's not just about money. It's very short-sighted to think of it that way. So spending the time to actually sit down and think of all the strategic reasons why it would be useful for this to close is a really good sense of things. Now, the other side of that that's really important is writing down your goal.
Mm-hmm.
So what is your target? So let's say I'm doing a job offer scenario because this worksheet works for everything. What is my goal? What is the amount of money that I want to have? What I think is realistic and would be like an optimal outcome for me. And then most importantly, and if you don't write down anything else on this sheet, on the inverse of your goal, write down what your resistance point is. So many times people walk into a job and they get an offer and they take it even though that offer is below what they think they're worth. And interestingly enough, that is actually way, way, way worse in some cases than being unemployed. Now, sometimes we need money to take care of our families and we don't get to make that choice. And I understand that. I've worked with a lot of people that have that issue. But I will tell you that underemployed people tend to be very toxic as employees later on down the road. So as an HR manager who's hiring someone, often they want to get them in the door for an amount that's going to make them happy so that they don't become a toxic employee later down the road. And when you are in the middle of a negotiation, when you're under duress, when the spotlight is on you, you have this social and kind of emotional imposition to take an offer no matter what it is, because it's harder for me to say no because the light's on me. So write this down so when you're in that situation and it's harder to say no, you make it a little bit easier to stick to your guns.
That's interesting. I never really thought of the fact that people who are underemployed or undercompensated become toxic later. I mean, it makes perfect sense. But you would think that the employer would always be trying to go for the lowest amount. But actually, that's a rookie mistake, seemingly.
It'd be really bad. And, most people don't do that. They want to get you in the door for what you think is fair. Mm-hmm. It's your perception of equity that they're optimizing for in many cases. So once you've gone through that stuff, your interests, you also want to write down options. So in business-to-business contracts, let's say I'm doing vendor or contract management or negotiation, there's a ton of different options. Good B2B sales folks, this is really where they shine. They write down a million different things they can throw in. So let's say I'm selling a SaaS or a software as a service product to a company. In reality, most software-based businesses have zero variable cost. So for every additional customer they sign, it doesn't really cost them anything.
Right.
That's why venture capitalists love investing in tech businesses so much, because as they make more money, their costs don't scale in line with the money they're making. On the inverse, if I am running a consulting business, in order to make more money, I have to hire more people. I got to pay more people. My variable cost is linear. It grows as my revenue grows. Ideally, it grows at a slower rate than my revenue, but it's still growing fast. So again, the options that are available to you in a negotiation are limitless in B2B contracts. With the job offer scenario, it may be more bounded. So I'm going to negotiate a job offer. This is something you and I have talked about before. I could offer to say, listen, I can start next week because I don't need a vacation. That's one option I can throw on the table. Another is an option of something I can ask for. So one thing that you brought up actually a couple years ago, which I hadn't heard before, was a friend of yours when he was negotiating job offers said that he wanted to get a lunch with the CEO once a quarter.
Right. He called it being close to the crown, which I thought was so clever. And I don't know if he made that up or if he'd gotten that from somebody, but that was a very tech-sounding thing for me.
Yeah.
And I think he was working at, I don't even think I'm allowed to say what it was. It's a very large social networking company, and one of the things that he wanted to do is twice a year, he wanted to have lunch with this very well-known founder of that company. And they were like, this is impossible. And he's like, well, that's really important to me. And they offered him a little bit of extra whatever it was. I don't think it was cash, but it was like paid vacation. He was like, no, I'd rather have the lunch. And they gave him the lunches. And it ended up being really beneficial to him because he was able to not only have essentially some kind of working, friendly relationship with someone who is constantly putting rungs between his position and the founder in the C-suite, but he would have direct connection with him, which no one else did. Even people who were also probably right below the C-suite never had any contact with him. He also got picked for different projects. He was top of mind for a lot of things because when they were looking for someone in his department, the founder would say, "What about that such and such guy? I had lunch with him a few months ago. He seems like a sharp guy."
Yeah.
And then they would go, "All right, well, you got handpicked by the guy himself.
Yeah.
So you're in."
Super smart.
Yeah.
I love that. So rounding out the worksheet here, so once I've gone through again what I'm negotiating, the timeline, the parties involved and what they want, my interests, my goals, my resistance point, I also, and the options I have available to me for negotiations, I'll write down my Batna, my best alternative to negotiated agreement. If I don't get this car, I'll get another car. If I don't get this house, I'll get another house. If I don't get this job, another job. I'll also write down the last two things are communication strategy. So what channel do I want to use for communication for this negotiation? For job offers negotiations, I often recommend that people do it by email because it's harder for them to kind of control their emotions via phone. It's harder for them to select their words carefully and at least run them by other people and say, hey, how do you feel about this wording or that? So email tends to be good for that.
And it's in writing.
And it's in writing, yeah, which is great. Definitely the lawyer comment.
Yeah.
You get credit for that one.
Yeah. Oh, we didn't say you had unlimited paid vacation. We said you had unlimited vacation. Oh, hold on. Here's you literally saying this.
No, definitely smart. Yeah, and I'd say for business to business stuff, I would always do it in person, always if you can, especially if you were the one selling something. Always be in person with them, always generate a physical, emotional relationship. Ooh, that sounded a little bit too much.
Mm-hmm.
Not romantic.
Yes.
A professional business physical relationship. Right, exactly. And then lastly, just a scratch pad. What information do you need? What questions do you need answered? So the whole point of this sheet is to approach negotiation as though you are studying up on something that you really need to understand and do well. And I will tell you that I don't print this sheet out and fill it out every single time I do a negotiation now, but you can bet your ass I know every single one of these things reflexively before I walk into a place where I'm negotiating with someone.
That's great. We'll make the sheet available on the website. It'll be inside the worksheets for this episode. It'll just be a page of that.
So the next one that we have here, and this is something we alluded to before, is this notion of something called social cost. So social cost is this really weird kind of element of behavioral effect that we're not always aware of, but affects our choices and our feeling of options and all kinds of things on a day-to-day basis in many ways in which we're not aware. This is that thing we were talking about before. It's very closely tied to the social fabric. So in many cases in a negotiation, the other side of the table will unknowingly try and increase the social cost of people saying no to them.
Okay.
So they'll say, this is a really great deal. We're giving you a great price. This is really lucky. There's a rebate this month. This is not something that you normally get. You're really lucky, right? To make you feel like you're getting a great deal, to make you less likely to want to negotiate. Now, they're not actually saying don't negotiate. They're not saying that they're not negotiable or that there isn't an opportunity to be flexible on price. They're just making it seem like they're not flexible on price through a lot of implicit things. They're effectively like incepting you, like Inception, like Leonardo DiCaprio's coming into your dreams, and he's like making you believe something that isn't necessarily real. Now, on the flip side, you want to increase the cost for other people asking you for things that you don't want to give up. And this happens all the time. So this could be, for instance, a boss talking to an employee. The employee is going to ask for a raise, as they typically do, at their quarterly or annual review. And the boss knows this, but the boss doesn't want to give a raise, maybe because they don't have the budget or it's going to be uncomfortable for them. But the employee really wants it. So ahead of that, the boss may drop a bunch of hints saying, okay, well, it's been a really rough quarter. Nobody's getting bonuses. There's no title escalation happening for anyone on the team. We're just kind of all hunkered down right now. Not saying you can't have a raise, not even mentioning that, but knowing that that's going to affect your willingness to ask that question when you sit down for a review. So this is something that affects us in ways that we are not aware of in most cases. And the first step is just being aware that it's happening. Being aware of why do I feel uncomfortable asking for this thing? Why do I think so? Because what we often do is we're taking our internal monologue of our insecurities around something, often contributed to by other people, and projecting them into real factors that affect the equation of the negotiation, when in reality they don't. We're still imagining them.
Okay, so this kind of boils down to, in some ways, well, actually, can you give us an example of social cost or ways in which this happens? Yes, the you're really lucky kind of situation. I feel like a lot of people might see through that in some ways, maybe not in real time. Is there anything that's a little more nuanced that you've experienced?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk to a couple of them. So one of the big examples is a car salesman. So let's say I'm going in and I'm buying a car, and the car salesman comes out, and maybe I'm with my girlfriend, and he goes, "Oh, what a beautiful couple. Oh, you remind me of my wife and I. Here's a picture of us. Oh, here's my kid. He loves baseball. You guys love the Giants? Oh, I love the Giants too." And he goes through this whole thing, humanizing himself to us, making him seem like he's really our buddy. And then I'm saying, you know, let me put together a really great price for you guys, and I'll come right back. In reality, what he's doing is he's making himself feel like there's this manufactured relationship so that I'm going to be less likely to put the screws to him, and I'm going to be more likely to believe that he's really doing me a favor. That's him increasing the social cost, putting the social contract in my face to make me less likely to want to negotiate with him.
Okay, interesting. So yeah, not just humanizing for the purposes of developing rapport, but because he knows that later on you're less likely to say, this is something I need this much off. I need you to throw in the floor mats or whatever.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and another great example of this is funeral directors. It's interesting. I've been working on a project that has to do with kind of death management and funeral management lately.
Yeah, you're always on the cutting edge of stuff no one else wants to do.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is when you're planning a funeral, and I've either directly or indirectly planned a lot of funerals in my life, unfortunately. But a funeral director will take advantage of the fact, in many cases, not all cases, but in many cases, take advantage of the fact that you are grieved, that you're not in a position to make optimal decisions when it comes to how much money you're willing to spend. So, for instance, many funeral homes get busted by the SEC or the FTC because they don't publicly disclose prices, although they're supposed to. Because they know once they have you sitting across the table from them, you're less likely to think about negotiating price because it feels distasteful. There's a high social cost for that because really you should be focusing on the right event for the loved one who just passed away. And they exploit that emotional weakness to their business benefit, unfortunately.
Yikes.
Yeah, so in that situation, just the area that you're in, the context, the emotional context of the situation has a very high social cost for you negotiating for the things you want. But you still can.
Yeah, so we're really on is it the defensive here? Because people the problem is normally we're negotiating with people who negotiate every day.
Yeah.
And we're doing it once this year.
Yeah.
Whether it's our boss, manager, hiring manager, or a salesman of some kind, because salesmen negotiate all day, every day for every sale they make, and you hopefully don't have so many people, dying or buying so many cars that you have tons of experience doing this yourself as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. It can work for you and it can work against you. It works against you in the obvious ways in the sense that they're just ready for it, and you may not be as ready for it. They've heard probably a lot of the things that you're going to say, but it also works for you in the sense that they are highly incentivized to make a deal. Any situation in which someone is incentivized monetarily or emotionally to make a deal, you can almost always negotiate. Plus, they have direct understanding of where they can go. It kind of goes back to a metaphor I use a lot in terms of poker. I played a lot of poker growing up. And one of the interesting things about it is that it's a lot easier to play poker against a good poker player than a shitty poker player, which
because you can predict their actions a little bit better.
Exactly, yeah. The poker player doesn't know what they're doing is all over the place. They're, raising you with a 7-2 offsuit, which is a really bad hand, and just doing crazy stuff because they don't know any better. They're making decisions that they aren't necessarily aware of or optimal or not. But, in the same thing in a negotiation, if you're working with a pro, they probably already have places that they can go and they know exactly where they can go. So the barrier for you getting that tends to be a little bit lower than if they had to find that shit out midway through a conversation with you.
That's a good point because, if you're negotiating with let's say another attorney for a settlement, you know that they want to create a settlement. You also know, or you might have some idea of what the other party can afford. Yeah. You obviously have some idea of the amount of damages or what it's going to cost for them to go to court and litigate it instead. Yeah. And I remember in law school negotiating really hard with two really smart guys. This is a mock exercise, of course. These are really good students, but they were terrible at the negotiation thing. And in the middle of it, they go, look, guys, we can't go down any further. This is the bottom that they said that we could do on the sheet. Here's our sheet. We're not allowed to go any lower. So, which is, by the way, never do that in negotiation.
Right. Maybe don't say that.
So we got the bottom price, and then we made them throw in a $10 gift certificate to Bed Bath & Beyond on the top of the settlement.
Just the ultimate smack in the face.
Just the ultimate, yes. So, okay, can't go below the amount, but you can give us something as well. And so in this case, really knowing that information and making sure that you can predict at least some of the paths that they'll go through is a huge advantage.
Huge advantage, yeah, for sure. I had a friend years ago, just a side story, who helped write the customer service escalation of concern book for customer service reps for a major U.S. carrier. Rhymes with Schmereisen. And he
A
basically...
lot of things rhyme with Schmereisen, though.
I know they
Good
do.
luck figuring that out.
Yeah, it really, it's a Da Vinci Code over here. But anyway, he wrote this book that basically said there were a magic series of phrases that would automatically escalate someone to a point eventually where this Schmereisen type company would basically just give them whatever they were asking for. But they had to keep escalating to a manager. So because they're dealing with such a high volume of people, they already had all these escalation paths written out explicit for people on the phone. And by just escalating to a manager every single time, eventually they're just willing to acquiesce to almost anything that you ask for.
Because whoever you're on the other end of the phone with, their time is more valuable than them trying to fight whatever you're asking for.
Yeah, there's 5,000 pissed off people in the queue behind you. I got to move on.
Okay.
So that brings us to another really interesting one.
Interesting.
So in a negotiation, you really, really never, ever, ever, I'm going to use a lot of repetitive words here, ever want to make the first offer. You hear that a lot, but let's unpack that a little bit.
Right.
Now, the reason you don't want to make a first offer in a negotiation, let's just take a job offer scenario as an example. When an HR representative asks you, what's your salary expectation? Now, in California, they can't legally ask you what your past salary is because that's been deemed to be a purveyor or kind of extension of some type of like institutional bias, which I don't necessarily agree with, but let's just say that that is the case. So they can't actually ask you that. But so often they will still ask you, what are your salary expectations? What do you want? And they'll even try and make it easier on you and say, what's a range that you're thinking? Which is stupid because they're only asking for the low number in the range. The high number doesn't mean anything. But you never want to give them that answer. You want to figure out a polite way to decline that. So if someone asks me, okay, Alex, we're really interested in making you an offer. What's your range so we can make sure we're in the same ballpark and give you a good answer or give you offer? I'll say, you know what? I'm comparing this offer to this job to a number of other opportunities I'm looking at, and base salary is only one of the factors. If you can make an offer, I'd love to compare it to other things I'm looking at. Really looking forward to it. Thank you. I will never give them a number. The reason is there's this concept in negotiations called information asymmetry. And this is one of the driving things in economics as well, and business in general, is that I know something you don't know and you're willing to pay for that information. Now, in a negotiation, it's very similar. If, for instance, their range was 100 to 200K, and I came in and said 95, they're going to go, here you go, 95K. Great, that's great. But I'm giving up potentially money. Now, even if that isn't the case, the probability that that is even possible is never worth testing or giving up. So in a situation where you have imperfect information, let the other side make the offer. Now, there's some situations where that is, there's an exception to that. One is if you know you have really good reason to believe the other party is going to come in super low. So that's the Craigslist example. So if I'm selling a couch on Craigslist, I don't say, make me an offer.
Right.
I say $400 or best offer, because otherwise I'm going to get everyone saying, screw you, I'll take the couch for free, right? Because I know they're going to come in low. That's the whole point of it. So absent of that like specific situation, never make the first offer if you can avoid it.
Is there any time that you've had somebody refuse to make the first offer when you've dodged or declined?
In job offer scenarios, extremely rare, because that person's entire job, an HR representative or recruiter, is to give you the offer and get you in the door. So they're going to make the offer. But yeah, I've had situations where people are really stubborn, but the most power in negotiation sides with the person or resides with the person who's willing to walk away. So if the other side just goes silent and won't give you an offer, walk away and look for other things. And eventually they will come back and give you an offer if they want to make this deal.
Good point. Okay, excellent. I can't remember the time at which that had happened. I know it's happened though. I remember them saying, "I'm sorry, we can't tell you, the initial thing." I'm like, "Well, just give me a ball." "No, I'm sorry, I can't." "Well, look, you got to start somewhere." "Well, you tell us what you're looking for." And I can't remember what this was, but it was just continual.
Yeah. Sometimes that happens with really hard to price things like services or like, someone's buying a company or something like that. But absent of situations like that are incredibly ambiguous and freeform, it's very, very rare.
That makes sense. All right. Good to know. So we won't worry about that.
Exactly. So I'm glad you said good to know, because the next one that I wanted to talk about here is the power of the word no.
The different no.
The different no. Exactly. N-O-W. No, that's
nope,
now.
that's now.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
I've been in a booth too long. So getting to know. No is such a beautiful word. As we mentioned before, the worst thing in a negotiation is a fast yes. So if someone goes, okay, how much do you want for it? You go, $100. They go, yes, shit.
Yeah, this is like the Seinfeld episode where Kramer is in court
Yeah.
suing Starbucks, I think, and they said, all right, we're willing to settle for free coffee for life, and he stands up and goes, I'll take it. And his lawyers just melt down, just
Exactly.
crumble.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, when you get a fast yes in a negotiation, it means you priced the situation incorrectly. It means you weren't aware of the information asymmetry and you made a bad call for the most part. And so in a negotiation, you need to love the word no, because no is what tells us where the ceiling is, or what tells us where the edges of the conversation are. Until you get a no, in many cases, you can't even have a negotiation. People are just giving you things.
Huh. Okay. Right. Yeah, that's true. If there's no resistance, there's not really a negotiation going on at that point.
Exactly. You're just asking for stuff and you're getting it. No, again, is the operant word that tells you where your where your boundaries are. So when I was in grad school, I had a professor who taught negotiation. She was brilliant. And she had us go out as a class exercise, one of our first homework assignments, and get 20 no's. And she'd just go out and just ask for stuff and just see what people say. And so I went out that week. We had an entire week to do this. And I went out to McDonald's, and I'd be going around to the drive-thru, and I'm like, okay, I'd like a cheeseburger and a milkshake. She goes, great, that'll be $7.50. I'd be like, all right, how about like $6.50? And she goes, okay, fine, just come around. I'm like, what?
Really?
I'm like, what?
You
is going
negotiated
on?
at McDonald's?
Well, I just asked for something.
shocked.
I asked for something that I thought there was no way that I would get it, because it's McDonald's. They sell like 1 billion burgers a day. There's no way they're going to negotiate on something.
She probably just paid the dollar out of her own pocket, the poor thing.
Yeah, or they don't care, like
Yeah.
in many cases. And, I was at a restaurant, and I'd say to the waiter, okay, like, I want free dessert, but I'll tip you more. The guy was like, okay, fine. And
I'm
like,
pretty
what?
sure that's not he got fired for that. But you did you got your negotiation.
Leaving a
moment,
trail of destruction behind
Yeah.
me. But I was proving the point here that it's really, really hard to get no's. And what the exercise teaches you is that the world, we imagine the world is made up of these inviolable rules that determine what we can and can't do on a day-to-day basis. But the truth is, the world's a lot smushier than that. People have a lot of latitude to make decisions one way or the other. They're in more power than we think they are.
Mhm.
And in the day-to-day trenches, there's lots of little things that are more open to negotiation than we even think. So by going out and doing that, it's an amazing experience. Now, I had some students who got together, now this has happened a couple times, as a group after my negotiation class, and they get together and they go out and get 20 no's together. Like you said before, sometimes it's easier to negotiate when you have someone with you. And every single time that it's happened, students have come back to me and said, we were there all damn day, and we asked everyone for everything that we knew we couldn't have, and we couldn't get 20 no's, so we gave up at like 5. And I'm like, I know, that's the whole point. Like, it is really hard to get 20 no's. And it's an amazing exercise. So anybody who's listening, I encourage you highly, go out and try and get 20 no's. It will change the way that you look at the word no.
That's so interesting. I've done similar things like this, of course, in advanced human dynamics in our trainings and stuff like this. And some of the stuff we tried doing a few years ago was a little bit like, okay, there's no way that someone's going to agree to this. And it's a little shocking.
Yeah.
You can go up to someone in public, and this is always at your own risk, but you can go up to people in public and ask for things, and often they'll be like, fine, okay. And you see videos like this on YouTube. This is probably safer. I'll give a YouTube example instead of a personal one. But you see videos like this all the time where people will walk up and say, hey, can I have a sip of your drink? And it's a total stranger, right? And oftentimes people are like, yeah, you can take it.
Yeah.
Take it. Go ahead. And people are like, the guy's like, what? They look at the camera all confused, or walking into a barber shop and going, can I have a free haircut? And the guy's like, yeah, what the hell, man? Come on in.
Yeah.
I'm not doing anything.
Yeah, I mean, part of it's generosity and that people are wonderful. In many cases, I believe that. Most people are.
Yeah,
they want to do good things. They want to help. But the other is the social contract thing that we keep coming back to, in the sense that people want to preserve that social fabric. They don't want to rock that equilibrium. And they're willing to forego personal interests or personal resources in order to maintain that social fabric. And, that can be a very naughty thing if you know that, and you're like exploiting that in other people on a regular basis. But, it doesn't always have to be done in a predatory way.
Yeah.
Just internalize the fact there's more flexibility.
I definitely spent a large part of my late 20s saying, how much for free shots to every bartender that I could possibly find?
How much for free shots?
Yeah.
I like that.
How much are free shots?
I love those
all right,
paradoxes. Those are great.
Yeah.
Like, no one goes to Coney Island anymore. It's too crowded. That's one of my
There you
favorites.
go. I like it. I like that. I never heard that one.
So on the inverse of this stuff, like getting a no, not being terrified of hearing a no, really wanting to hear a no, needing that to tell you where the ceiling is, needing that to avoid a fast yes, you also have to be comfortable saying no. And that's a really important one.
There's always a catch.
There's always a catch, right? It's tough. I mean, it's hard to say no. Just like for the reasons that we just mentioned, we want to protect the social fabric. That's inside of all of us. Even me, I'm acutely aware of what the social fabric is doing to my decision-making criteria, and even I want to be agreeable in many cases. So you need to learn how to say no. You need to learn how to say no to a job offer that just doesn't meet your expectations. Not like a douche, but in like a respectful way. And if you do it correctly, no can be the beginning of a relationship as opposed to the end of it. We often, because we fear rejection so much, we think that anytime we say no to someone, it's so damaging, that's it. That's the end of the conversation. But, previous time in my life, I had, left a company that I was at, and it was the first time in my life that I hadn't been gainfully employed. And I remember I rage quit on like a Monday, and I went home and I sat on my bed.
Rage quit?
I rage quit. Well, it was kind of a slow rage. It was building, and then it hit a critical point.
You gently and quietly set your mug down, picked up your things, thanked all your colleagues, and walked out the door.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. With a lot of rage. Silent rage.
Silent rage boiling
Friendly
up
rage.
inside.
Yeah. But anyway, so I sat down on my bed, and I was sitting there. I'm like, well, what the hell do I do now? I didn't have emails buzzing in. I didn't have any work, all that kind of stuff. So I had a moment in my life where I'm like, okay, I'm going to take a second. I'm going to figure out what I want to do next with my life. So I started just going on LinkedIn and sending out messages to about 15 to 20 people a day. Random people that just piqued my interest in terms of the company they were working at or their job or whatever.
What kind of message?
Yeah, so it was really simple. It was like 3 sentences. It was my name, and then I name dropped really a bunch of social proofing in the first thing. Like I came from these companies, I worked with these people, this kind of thing. I'm really interested in and that was just 1 or 2 sentences. I used brands that they would recognize, something that sounded like they would be interesting if they knew absolutely nothing about me other than that. And it's a little bit self-promoting in that sense, but you have to break through the noise in some sense. You can't tell people your life story in a cold email because they have no interest in talking to you. They don't know who you are. But so a little bit of name dropping and social proofing. And then I'm really interested in your business, and it's always great to meet cool people doing interesting things in the space. I'd love to grab coffee. I'm going to be in your city next week or something like that. I'd love to let me know what your schedule looks like. Really basic, simple thing. And so I started meeting with a bunch of different people. And through that, I started getting job interview offers. And I started taking those interviews. And from that, I started getting job offers. But I wasn't ready to start taking a job. But through the process of doing the interviews and the job offers, I was asking a lot of questions. I was learning about these companies. And I found a lot of really targeted problems. I'm like, yeah, someone like me with my experience could come in and fix this thing for them. And I'm like, yeah, I can see why they're hiring for this position because they have this need. And so when I would get the job offer, my response was, you know what? I really love your company. I love the team, and I'm excited about the future of your company, but I'm just not ready to commit to a full-time role. But you have this problem, A, B, and C, and I could solve these problems for you, A, B, and C, in a contractor consulting capacity. And then maybe it can turn into full-time, employment later on down the road. And it's amazing how many people said yes. And I basically built saying no to job offers into a consulting practice that now has people that work for it and get revenue and all these other things and, feed their families. But it was saying no generated a relationship because I did it in a positive way. It was no, but. It wasn't no and walk away and shut the door. No, but. Now, that's an extreme example. I'm not necessarily advocating everyone start a consulting business when you turn down a job offer.
Right.
But the point is that if they expressed enough interest in you to offer you a position, there's probably something there that you can add value to, even if you don't end up taking the job. So you need to learn to look at no in different situations constructively like this. Saying no can be very powerful.
One of the concepts that I find so interesting about this is the concept of making, or the idea that we should make the other side reactive. And not like provoke them per se, but what does this mean?
Yeah. So in a negotiation, you want to or endeavor to construct a dynamic where the other side is worried about taking actions that are going to piss you off or throw you off, and that they're going to lose the sale, let's just say, not the other way around. So let's take a job offer scenario again, because that's so common to many of us. Often when the company makes an offer and then we are reacting to that offer, we are constantly in the situation of them providing information and us reacting to it. And that puts us at a disadvantage from a leverage perspective or a perceived leverage perspective because they're controlling the conversation. Now, this is happening right now in the media with Donald Trump, right? The media can't help itself but react to every little tweet, everything that the guy does. So as much as like the mainstream media is trying to like cover him responsibly, let's give them the credit to say that they are. He's completely controlling the conversation because he's so wild with his responses that they can't do anything but control them. He has all the control in the situation. So it's similar in negotiations. So what we want to do is construct a dynamic where we're not constantly reacting to what other people are saying, that they are also reacting to us. So in a job offer scenario, which we'll walk through in a moment, kind of an end-to-end thing, we want to construct that dynamic where they give us the offer, then we turn it around so that they are now reacting to us as opposed to the other way around. So we'll walk through that in a minute. So keep this one in your mind. We'll come back to it.
A lot of people I notice also negotiate against themselves,
Oh my
and this
God,
is a lot of this I think is born of social pressure. And what this sort of sounds like is, all right, well, this is $300, and the other person goes, I don't know, and you go, all right, $250.
Yeah.
How's that sound?
Yeah. You and I were violating one of the inviolable rules of men that we were talking in the bathroom about this before. But like junior salespeople do this kind of shit all the time, right?
Yeah.
They make an offer on the phone, and someone who's responding to that offer is just silent for a little bit. And then they go, okay, well, it's $300. Nothing on the other side. But, we're negotiable on that. And, okay, well, we want to work with your budget and that kind of thing. Their side hasn't said anything. They're already beginning to counter themselves without the other side having to say a thing. So often, you don't want to give people a way out. Another way that this manifests is when we make offers, we add the little thing at the end to say, or I'm negotiable. Like, I think this is what I would like, but I'm willing to negotiate on that. That's me negotiating against myself. Whereas the smart play, the powerful play is just say $300, then wait and let the other side react to that comment, as opposed to inviting them to give you a counter.
Right. And it feels so good because you release that pressure when you say, well, we're flexible on this.
Yeah.
And even sometimes I have to catch myself stop myself from doing that. I'm experienced with this. I was in sales for a long time. I've run a business for over a decade. I still have to stop myself from going, well, it's this much, but I'm also flexible on this if there's other things that we could figure out. And then you're just going, I catch myself and I go, damn it.
Yeah.
What am I doing?
So it's funny. I mean, that's one of the more overt ways people do it. They say, but we're flexible, or,
Right.
but I'm interested to hear what you're saying. A more kind of discreet way is that people say things like, but we're really excited to work with you guys.
Oh,
Or like, we'd love to have your business or something like that. When they do that, they're communicating that they're extremely eager to get your business to make it seem like they're going to bend over backwards or be more pliable.
Interesting. I never really thought about that as also being a subtle hint that they would negotiate against themselves, but it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it's huge.
In fact, I was negotiating something yesterday, and the company did say a lot. We really like working with you. We want to figure something out. It was we'll look at other options if we can't meet on the financial side.
Yeah, they're telegraphing weakness at that point.
Yeah.
To put it a little bit less mean than that, they're telegraphing a willingness to listen to a counter that you're going to come back with. So,
Right.
I would always say in a negotiation, don't volunteer that. Don't introduce weakness into your offer unless you absolutely have to. Now, if you're selling something, you may have to come back later and say, okay, well, that doesn't work for you. What about this? Or give me your budget, give me more information, and then I will give you a counter that makes sense to you. But that should come later, and they should ask for it as opposed to you volunteering it.
That makes sense. Okay, great.
So really closely tied to that is kind of the next one, which is strategic silence. So one of the things that I teach in my class is that we have this gigantic hole in the middle of all of us called the human condition, and we're constantly trying to fill that hole with all of the affectations and hobbies and all kinds of things that we do. We're trying to fulfill or kind of take care of our insecurities. So as a result, one of the ways in which that human insecurity comes out in negotiations is how painful silence can be. So like we just mentioned, someone makes an offer over the phone and there's some silence, and then the junior salesperson immediately starts negotiating against themselves. That's because they can't take the silence. They assume the silence, they feel this excruciating pain when there is silence. So let's make it a little bit more human. So let's say I'm at a bar and I meet the girl of my dreams, and it's fantastic. And I see her from across the room. I hear wedding bells, the room like parts, and it's just her and me and nobody else, and it's amazing. We start chatting it up. Everything's fantastic. She gives me her number. I go home.
She
can't
shows
wait.
up in your apartment randomly 3 months later.
Oh, remember that story?
Different story.
Different story. Totally different story. But I'm glad I made out of that with my life. But anyway, so we exchange numbers, and the next day, we're immediately texting back and forth. Neither of us can wait to talk to each other. We can't play it cool. Every 2 seconds, going back and forth, jokes, memes, haha, LOL. I'm going back and forth with my friends like, hey, what do you think haha with 5 ha's mean? Is that better than LOL, or is that not as good as LOL? What do you guys think this means? And I'm trying to like decode it with a damn Rosetta Stone to figure out what this person's intentions are. I'm stressing out over this text message conversation, but it's great. And then maybe back and forth, I use some joke that's like slightly riskier, like a Trump meme or something political in nature, and there's silence on the other end of the phone.
Oh, this happened with me and my wife.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I know where you're going with this. Yeah, what happened was we were talking on this app. This is obviously before we got married, before we even really were dating. In fact, I don't even know if we'd met up in person yet.
Farmers only, right?
Farmers only.
That's where you guys met.
Where that's my secret weapon.
Beautiful.
And I can't remember exactly what I said, and it sure doesn't matter. And I never, even if I did, I probably wouldn't repeat it. But I said something along the lines of, well, it doesn't matter. But then it was dead silent. And I went, oh, man. And I resisted the urge to fill that in because I knew from experience that if you couldn't, I'm sorry, was that all? Yeah. I just left it. And then the next day I was like, so what happened? And she goes, oh, I fell asleep.
Yeah.
And I was like, thank God.
Yeah, there could be a million reasons why that happens, right? Like, maybe Jay fell asleep. Maybe she did something else. Like, who knows? Maybe she had a soccer game or like a polo match or whatever the hell it is.
Water polo, for sure.
Whatever she does. I'm sure she has weird hobbies. But the point is we assume the worst because of all of our insecurities, because of this human condition. So in a negotiation, when there's a moment of pause, even in conversation over the phone, it's excruciatingly loud to us. It's deafening silence. So that is used on us frequently, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally. We can also use it for our own purposes. So an example, back to the job offer scenario, someone gives me an offer. That doesn't mean that I just don't respond for 15 days. That is not the right way to handle that situation. But creating some strategic silence for yourself in a way that is socially acceptable, saying something like, okay, well, when do you need to make what do you need to make the decision by? Or when do you need me to get back to you by? That will create some time. They'll say, okay, by Friday, we'd like to have an answer back. That will not only create distance for you, but it also creates the sense the person on the other end of the phone, the HR representative, is going to assume you're looking at other jobs. There's something else that you need to decide before you can make a decision on this. So it solves kind of both of those purposes. But the point is, understand when strategic silence is being used against you. Understand why you have that reaction to it. It doesn't necessarily mean something bad is happening. It also could be just, again, the human condition for us. And then learn how to use it strategically for your own purposes. Create it intentionally inside of conversations and negotiations to your benefit.
How do we create it?
Yeah. So in the job offer scenario, I'm creating distance by saying, when do you need an answer by? That creates that time for me to think about it. Let's think of another example. So let's say I am buying a car and the car salesman goes, okay, I'm going to give you a great deal. Let me talk to my manager. I'm going to come back. I'll give you the best price. He comes back and he goes, okay, here's the best price, $24K out the door. Here you go. Best price. You're really breaking my balls. It's great. And then I just sit there and stare at him. I'm like,
yeah.
I'm not giving anything
Charlie
back.
Manson eyes.
Exactly. If you like poker, Phil Ivey, the guy just like stands there like he's in the middle of having a seizure, like eyes wide open, like mouth open, like giving absolutely nothing back. The person will eventually start talking. I've heard folks in kind of a sales training capacity, as I've trained sales teams myself, say things like the first person after an offer has been made, the first person to say something is the one who loses. Like that's some game in and of itself.
Jeez.
So let the other person talk.
I would imagine that has its limits. You don't just pick up your phone and check email until the other person decides to say something.
Yeah, it's super weird. Yeah, you can't use it in a weird way. You need like a societally and socially acceptable way to create that distance for you.
Mm-hmm. All right. What about some of the gender differences in negotiating? I brought this up earlier in the first part of the show, which was that I've had female friends of mine bring me to car dealerships because they know that I'll negotiate better or that I'll do something that they might not do. And it's not just because I'm a guy and they're a girl. It's because they trust me and I'm their friend, et cetera.
Yeah.
And because my dad gets wicked Ford discounts. But also, there is some element of gender disparity when it comes to negotiation.
Oh yeah, it's a real sensitive topic in 2018 to talk about this stuff. But I will say before I get into it that this is not a value judgment one way or the other. Mm-hmm. I fundamentally believe that women are better prepared to be negotiators than men because empathy comes more naturally to them. And there's all kinds of things that happen that equalize the sexes in terms of like outcomes longitudinally, but this is not a value judgment. There are different patterns that we see consistently across different genders. So for instance, men, before they walk into a negotiation, are much more commonly will psych themselves up. They'll go into this kind of predator mentality. There's that joke in 30 Rock where before a negotiation, Jack Donaghy, played by Alec Baldwin, will look in the mirror and goes, "You're a lion. You're going to get in there and kill your mommy's little boy." He's like psyching himself up like a maniac before he walks in and sits down at the negotiation table because it makes it easier for him to, again, advocate for his own self-interest. Now, men do that very commonly. They will psych themselves up. They will look at negotiations as a zero-sum game. Women tend to be on the inverse, where as opposed to looking at negotiations like a zero-sum game, they look at it as a relationship developing exercise, where I'm focused on community and moving towards the right goal eventually as opposed to winning right now. Men tend to be very short-term focused in outcomes and goals. Women tend to own long-term outcomes. So men will often in negotiation scenarios, and we see this a lot with business to business or sales roles, outperform women in short-term sales, whereas women will outperform men in long-term deal value. Another thing that we see a lot and how this kind of plays out in a really unfortunate way is that women often don't ask for the things they want. As we mentioned before earlier in the show, women, it's been estimated are somewhere in the neighborhood of 64 or 5% less likely to negotiate than men when it comes to job offer scenarios. That's a really big problem, and it also contributes very heavily to the pay gap between men and women.
So how do we mitigate this? Do we just understand that this is the case, that often if we're for a woman, we might not be asking for what we should be because of the way that we've been programmed socially or the way that we've been raised, and we should just be aware of that?
The first step is always being aware. Now, not everyone conforms neatly to the gender which they were assigned at birth, right? Some women are more masculine in the way they approach negotiations. Some men are more feminine, so to speak. I know that may sound like a negative connotation, but it isn't in any way. Men may focus more on relationships and community. So not everyone is the same. These are general kind of archetypes. But I will say, if you do conform to one of these, know that. Be aware of when you're doing it and figure out the weaknesses of it. So again, for men, if I'm really male focused and I'm super dominant and psyching myself up, that predator mentality, consider the community aspect of it. Consider the relationship and long-term outcome side of it. If I'm a woman and, I'm focusing too heavily on the relationship side, and this is very common for women, women will often de-escalate their own needs in light of other people's needs. So imagine if there's a disparity, other people's needs are at square one, I'm putting mine 2 squares down from that because I don't want to rock the social fabric that much. That's one area where I work with a lot of women specifically to kind of fight that impulse, because you need to bring your interests at least at par with other folks. And don't feel guilty about that. Because at the end of the day, if you're not advocating for your own self-interest, no one's going to do it for you. You will consistently be taken advantage of, not just by individuals, but by situations.
That makes sense. I guess a hack to this might be thinking, well, am I negotiating on behalf of myself, or am I negotiating on behalf of maybe my kids?
Yeah.
I think if you think about it that way, or my family,
Exactly.
Are my needs less important now? Well, no. If I don't get this raise, I can't send my kid to the school that he needs to go to get educated and get a career that pays better than mine.
Well, one thing that made it really easy for me is, I start companies for a living. I have a fiduciary responsibility to my employees to protect them and their livelihood. And if I'm not maximizing my company's value in a deal, I'm putting them at a disadvantage. I'm hurting my ability to employ them. If your family, same thing. Like, I need to protect my family. I need this money because I can spend it on my kids. I can spend it on, an unforeseen health issue that comes up, all kinds of things. So you, again, have a fiduciary responsibility to yourself to maximize personal value in negotiating scenarios, because, again, no one will do that for you.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think a lot of people are also in a hurry to get the negotiation over with. They want it to be over. They hate every second of it. The quicker this ends, the better.
Yeah.
Let's alleviate the social pressure. And I think that causes problems.
It does, yeah. I mean, you keyed in on a really important issue. When you rush, you make bad decisions. And like we talked about before, everyone is generally terrified of negotiation. They just want it to end, even people who do it on a daily basis. When you enter the realm of negotiations, people become sensitive and you can lose them. Even as a salesperson, I want it to end, and I want it to end quickly for a favorable outcome for me. And so what I tell people in negotiations is be aware that we want the negotiation to end, and so we're going to over-optimize for getting it over with. So that's situations where we say yes to things that we don't want. We don't want to say a no because we just want to get it over. So in poker worlds, one of my favorite examples of this is poker players go on tilt sometimes. You've heard that phrase before potentially, but I used to play tournament-style poker, and that may mean that I'm playing for 15 or 18 hours at a time if I'm doing well in a tournament. But if you get a bad beat in a tournament, especially if you're like mentally taxed already, you can't let it go. And maybe it's one person at the table took my money and I want to get that money back. So I just go after blood. I go into that kind of bloodthirsty Viking. What's that thing they talk about when like Vikings go crazy?
Berserker.
Berserker mode, exactly. You go into this like berserker mode. And so the way to fight that in poker is just slow it down. Just start auto-folding some hands. Get up, walk around, take a breath, create some distance, and just chill for a second. That is huge. And in negotiations, do the same thing. You don't have to react immediately. one of the things that I teach my students heavily is if anyone gives you an offer of any kind, no matter what the situation, don't react immediately. Your first reaction should be no reaction. It should be, okay, got it, thank you, I appreciate the offer. When do you need an answer by? Let me think about it, I'll get back to you. Even if the person is standing in front of you, okay, can I have a moment to think about it? I'll be right back. Create some distance, slow it down, relax, don't go on tilt, and fight that impulse to immediately give an answer.
Interesting. So don't pull the Phil Hellmuth, get up and start yelling at the people at the table.
The biggest baby. Definitely don't. Well, for that guy, he's fully optimized his life around being the big baby and can throw other people off intentionally. But yeah, don't be that guy.
He was on the show.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
I hope he's listening.
Maybe not to this one. Yeah. I hope not. He was really nice.
Yeah, no, he's supposedly a great guy. So the next one that's huge here, and this is one we referenced the book before, Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss.
Right.
But one of the things that he talks about a lot is the illusion of control. So before he could become an FBI hostage negotiator, he was asked to be I think it was a suicide hotline phone responder. So when someone calls in, they're looking to commit suicide or they're having suicidal thoughts, he's the person that you're talking to at the end of the day because that prepared him to be able to negotiate for life and death scenarios on behalf of the FBI. And so one of the real interesting things here is that when he was talking to people in those situations, he said he would use a late night FM DJ voice. It's kind of funny because we're sitting in a recording booth, so I feel like I can do this very convincingly, but he would slow it down, he would deepen his voice, he would talk very calmly, and he would put the other person at ease. Now, the reason that he wanted to do that is if I'm talking...
He's so bad at that job.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Oh, you're going to pull the trigger? Oh, yeah, you're a tough guy, huh? Go ahead and do it. Do it. See if you have the balls.
I don't think you have it in you.
Shoot. That did not work.
Yeah, that'd
Jordan,
be a
you're
rough one.
fired.
Yeah, sometimes we're not. It's okay. You're going to be great at a lot of things.
Yes.
That just may not be your thing.
Hostage negotiation, definitely not one of those things.
Yeah, but the whole point is we want people to be calm, but we also want to give them the sense that they're in control, this illusion that they're in control. When people feel like they're out of control, they begin to shut down. There's another theory inside of behavioral psychology. If anybody on the listening is a big fan of Reddit or Injury, you'll probably see this frequently on those platforms referenced, but it's called the terror management theory. That every decision that we make in our lives is in some way either directly or indirectly abstracted away from our fear of death. Now, the interesting thing there is that our fear of death is very closely tied to our feeling of control. If I feel like I'm out of control, things are going down a bad angle, all kinds of bad things could happen. I could die in an extreme scenario. So because that's hardwired into us at this kind of deep operating system level, when we feel like we're out of control, we have this unreasonable level of anxiety that comes up as a result of it. So in a negotiation, when people feel like they're out of control, it triggers an anxiety response from them that can make them shut down. So if you're talking to someone on the other side of the table and you feel them beginning to shut down using body language or inflection and reading that, which we'll talk about in a minute, take it back from them. Step back, maybe take yourself out of the context of that conversation and help them reestablish their sense of control so they don't immediately shut down. So it's possible for you to have a productive conversation.
Interesting. Okay, great. Yeah, because we don't want to push too hard and then people just check out.
Yeah, exactly.
That doesn't seem productive at all. And I can understand why people do that. And I can also understand the idea behind wanting to kind of dominate someone so much that you're like, I've got this, but it's going to blow up in your face, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have this problem a lot. I'm a taller guy. I have a deep voice. I make a lot of direct eye contact and direct body language, open body language. And I can be very intimidating in some cases. So in those situations where I can see that I'm upsetting someone else that I'm talking to, or they're beginning to shut down, maybe they have some closed body language, like they're beginning to touch their face or hands or neck, I will begin to modulate the conversation. I'll step back and I'll stop talking about that. I will maybe talk about something that will put them at ease. I will find a subject that we have in common, of a common interest. Maybe I'll talk about the fact that I'm Greek. Everybody loves Greek people. They see my big fat Greek wedding. They love baklava. Right. And so I'll kind of step back and change the focus of the conversation, again, to put them at ease.
Yeah, that's wise. So does this modulate, or does it only modulate that tension, or does it actually work against us? Is there any risk of this working against us, I think is what I'm trying to ask here.
Yeah, so any one of the pieces of advice we're talking about here taken too far can be bad. Right? So if we go too far and we give them all the control and they're calling all of the shots, that puts us at a disadvantage. We just want them to not shut down. We want them in a positive frame of mind so that they're still productive and willing to kind of discuss with us and be at the table. We don't want a situation where they can't have a constructive conversation because they're getting too defensive. That shuts things down.
All right. So since most people want this to end, not the show, hopefully, but the negotiation
Right.
and generally, but the negotiation in general, can we use that to our advantage? Like if I know that you want to get out of here because you're not a great negotiator, but I'm experienced, can I use the fact that I know you are itching to get out of this and get this over with to my advantage?
Oh, definitely, 100%. That's so huge. So, in my negotiating tactics, when I negotiate with folks, one of the secret sauces that I have is that I work very heavily to take that empathy side of things, right? Learning about what they want, what their interests are, to effectively help the other side see a win. So, give you an example. So, let's say I am going to buy a car, and I go to a car dealership, and I'm walking around the lot, and I'm talking with the car dealer or the salesman, and he thinks that I'm really going to make a deal today. Like I want to buy a car today. He's going to bend over backwards to get me what I'm looking for. If he thinks I'm shopping around, he's less likely to give me what I'm looking for because there's no point in it for him. There's no benefit. That's why a lot of car dealerships really resist giving you quotes over the phone because it makes it too easy to go somewhere else and get a better price.
Right.
But they don't want that. So in a negotiation, I will go through great lengths to make the other side believe that there is a favorable outcome that is realistic for them. I will go so much as to describe it or tell them that it's going to happen. Because if they know that, if they see the close of a deal and it's favorable to them, I can dip into that understanding, their kind of thirst for getting a good outcome, and I can extract value. So to what you were saying, you never want to underestimate how much the other side wants it to be easy, wants the negotiation to end. Very few people enjoy the brawl of it. It's painful for them. So if I tell you, I'm going to buy this thing today, if you give me the price I'm looking for, we can sign the papers right now, you're much more likely to negotiate with me. So I focus a lot of time figuring out exactly what the other side wants and then telling them it's right here on the other side of you just doing this one thing. And then once I get that thing, it's over with.
Great. Okay, I like that. So you're just sort of letting them taste the freedom of being done with it.
Exactly.
And then they're just sniffing their way through to the door.
Exactly. Yeah. So, in the job offer scenario that we'll talk through in a minute, kind of step by step, the real thing that we're trying to do there is make the other side see if they give me the offer that I want, if they give me the number that I want, the negotiation's over right now. There's not even a question. I'm not asking you through some like vague sense that it may be over if you give me these things. But no, I'm saying if you give me this thing, it's over right now. They're much more willing to take that. It's a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush type thing.
Yeah.
It's every old adage just applied to negotiation. So that's really what we're doing here. I'm saying, I will give it to you right now. Just do this one thing.
We're making this process seemingly more complex than most people normally would, right? They're going, okay, they said it was this salary. Can I have $5,000 more? Yes. Okay, great. The end. Or no, how about half as much? Great. The end. Is there any problem with the back and forth and the counters? Is there any risk to that causing more problems than it solves?
Oh, yeah, totally. So, it's a really interesting one. In negotiations, we want to mitigate the back and forth or stop of it as much as we can because too much going back and forth typically means that you're being jerked around. So very similar to what we talked about a moment ago with helping the other side visualize the win. When you think a deal is possible, you're much more willing to bend over backwards. If you think someone is just fishing or they want a price they can go and communicate to somebody else to leverage you a better deal with someone else, then you're likely to shut down. And it's the same in job offer scenarios. So if someone offers you a job and you come back with a counter and then they give you another counter and then you counter again, there's a point at which you have diminishing returns to scale. So I can continue to ask for other things, but I'm beginning to cost the relationship a lot and I'm getting less and less every single time that I ask. So it behooves you to make the negotiation end quickly with a favorable outcome because again, every single time you go back, there is a cost to that. Now, that being said, with job offer negotiations, I say 2 counters max is a good zone to be in. Once you do more than 2 counters, someone gives you an offer, you counter. They come back, you counter again. More than those 2 counters, you're beginning to cost the relationship, and it's less and less likely you're going to come to a good place. Now, with like business-to-business deals, sales deals that are more transactional, there can be a lot of back and forth, and it's okay that can take a lot longer.
That makes sense. Yeah, complex deals, people are ready for that. There are teams of lawyers or founders ready to sit down and hammer something out. They don't expect it to be over in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But yeah, the job offer 2 counters max rule makes sense. I even think in certain sales it makes sense because if you're going to, in theory, work with that person, right? If it's a job offer.
Right.
And if they counter, you give them something, they counter again, you're starting to wonder, is this person just always going to be like this? Because I don't want to have all this friction all the time
Yeah.
whenever I deal with this guy.
Yeah.
It's going to be really irritating.
Yeah, and really the secret message that we interpret from that kind of situation, if I'm the person who's being negotiated with, is that this person cares more about themselves than they do about me. Now, that's okay in doses, but when taken too far, again, like you said, it burns through the relationship.
Great. Okay. You mentioned earlier being ready to walk away. When do we deploy this? Because I think a lot of people, if we do this wrong, you just ruin everything, right? If you're just hanging up the phone on people, it's not working out for you.
Like, get an offer, walk away, get an offer, walk away. Yeah, but, they say there's this kind of like trite, saying with relationships that the person who cares less has all the leverage or something like that.
Yeah, sure.
I hate that saying.
Yeah,
I think that's
me too.
a really utilitarian way of looking at relationships. But let's just say that is kind of true in some situations, especially when it comes to negotiation. So if I'm not willing to walk away, then no matter what anyone offers me, I have to take that thing. And God forbid someone on the other side of the table finds that out, then they're not going to negotiate with me. They're going to say, take it or walk away.
Right.
But they know you can't, so you're just going to take it. They have absolutely zero imperative to give you anything or negotiate with you at all. So unless you are ready to walk away or you're prepared to, not that you have to or realistically will, but unless you are prepared to or able to, you can't negotiate. So, one of the reasons that I believe that women are, this is going to come back to it, I promise this will tie in. One of the reasons I believe women are naturally better negotiators than men because empathy comes more naturally to them is because I learned most of what I know about negotiation from my mom. My mom is an absolute animal. If you think like I'm a tough negotiator, she is like 100 times worse than I am.
Really?
She's an absolute animal. So when we were kids, she wanted a car called an Isuzu Trooper, which I don't think they make anymore.
It's like a little Jeep. Right?
Yeah, it's like an SUV. And she wanted one with this purple sparkly paint job and a 6-disc CD changer, which for the kids listening in was like what iTunes was, Spotify.
Right.
I don't even know what iTunes is anymore. What Spotify was like way back in the day with physical CDs, which were these circular things that were shiny that had music on them that you put inside.
And you had to open your trunk to change the CDs in the changer.
Exactly. But that was like ballin' outrageous in like the 90s. That was like next level stuff. So my mom wanted this Isuzu Trooper, and because she knows exactly what she's doing, she went to the dealership at like 5 p.m. on a Friday on like the 31st at like the end of the month. These guys are like about to close their quota. It's the end of the week. They want to get out of there. And just as they're shutting the door and turning the lights off, she sticks her foot in the door and goes, I want to test drive that car. And the salesman looks at her and goes, oh, shit, okay, fine. Puts his head down, grabs the keys, walks out of the parking lot, and we start test driving the car. So she test drives the car for like an hour and a half.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, it's like 4 o'clock in the morning at this
irritating.
point. The guy's like dying. He just wants to get home to his family. He's tired of this shit. And then my mom starts laying into this guy. When he can't take it anymore, it's at the end of the day, he has zero ability to resist. So she starts going, all right, give me a good price. He goes, okay, I can do this. She's like, that's bullshit. That's not going to do it for me. Let's get serious.
Does she talk like that?
Oh, my mom curses like a sailor. She makes me look like I'm, Shakespearean.
That's great.
But she starts laying into this guy, just putting the screws to him. My brother and I, of course, little kids, we're in the back seat, probably as some type of negotiating leverage.
Yeah.
But I'm not willing to admit that to myself.
Yeah.
So she's in there and she's putting the screws to this guy and just absolutely terrorizing this guy, beating him down and down and down over and over again. Well, that's not going to do it. What if I pay cash? What will you do this way? And going through all these things. And she gets to within $100 of her price. And the guy just can't do it. He's been beaten down so much that he has no ego left. She's like chewed all of it up and spit it out and left it on the side of the road. And he just can't do it. And so we get down with $100 and he goes, I can't make it happen. She goes, all right, fuck you. And she leaves. And so this guy, I can't even imagine like the night he had after that. Probably the whole weekend he had after that. Ruined his whole weekend. But anyway, so she leaves because she knows if he doesn't give her exactly what she wants, she will find it somewhere else. And not only that, she'll probably find it pretty soon. So sure enough, she finds the exact same car she's looking for at another dealership. The next week, gets the car for the exact price she wants, and then takes the car after getting the keys, drives it back to the first dealership, makes the guy come out with his boss and goes, you could have had this sale.
Oh, that's so mean.
Yeah, this woman is like next level stuff. She's not even walking on planet Earth.
What?
But she's an absolute maniac, but she's right. Like, and the reason that she won there was because she was willing to walk away. She has immense power, and no one has power over her because she knows if you don't give it to me, I will get it somewhere else. Imagine the power of internalizing that way of looking at life. She's unstoppable.
How did you grow up a nice person? That's what
I'm going to be unpacking the effects of these things for the next 50 years.
That's so terrible.
No, but it's great though because she raised my brother and I to be very empowered because you know what? If we don't get it here, we will get it somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Wow. You definitely, got to be ready to walk away.
Yeah.
I don't know about that whole showing up the next week with the thing you got and rubbing it in their face. I don't know. Is that optional?
Well, she's like a huge adherent of street justice. She is like judge, jury, and execute. She's the Judge Dredd of like negotiating.
Jeez.
She's dispensing justice on the street wherever she goes. But she is, some people would say life's too short, let it go. She's like, life's too short to let people get away with shit.
Yeah.
So she makes everybody like pay the price for their transgressions because they need to be taught. I think it's a motherly thing. I think it's like, Mom, I need to teach you.
So there's some compassion involved in there.
Very much so, yeah.
I wouldn't be doing this if my kids weren't in the car. Right. Sure,
Right.
Mom.
This is for your own good.
This is for your own good. It hurts me more than it hurts you.
Exactly.
What about keeping that positive frame of mind? What about staying collaborative? What about staying positive?
Yeah, so we referenced this a little bit before with kind of the illusion of control and the late night FM DJ voice, the Chris Voss thing. But, another way to look at this is you want to keep people in a place where they're still willing to collaborate. So there's lots of ways in addition to, keeping people's illusion of control to do this. Yeah. So one way that my mom does it is she has kind of her Susie cutesy routine, she calls it, where she'll go in and she'll just kind of act like she doesn't know what's going on. Like, oh, what is that? Is this bad? Oh, is that good? Like, I don't even know. Like, and she knows exactly what the hell she's doing. But she walks in and acts like she doesn't so that it disarms people. She's like, oh, no, like, this is what you want, ma'am. She's like, oh, is that good? And then she puts the screws into people. But, in a more practical sense, many people do this by being friendly with their body language, by seeming open and collaborative and smiling when they talk, things like that. Body language can go a long way to keeping people disarmed. And, salesmen, like we talked about before, will do this in a way to increase social cost to me negotiating with them, but also to keep me in a positive frame of mind by saying things like, noticing areas where we may have something in common. I'm wearing a Giants shirt. He's a big fan of the Giants. That keeps me in a positive frame of mind by establishing a rapport.
Great. Yeah. Okay, good. So we're smiling when we talk. We want to collaborate.
Not in a creepy way, because taken too far, again.
What are you trying to say?
Look like a serial killer. Not you. Your beautiful smile.
I appreciate it. All right. Okay, so do we stay? Is there a place for confrontational nonverbal communication, or like how do we calibrate our nonverbals other than our Susie cutesy routine and getting that locked in? So
poker playing, I'm a huge fan of body language. Huge fan. Because, there's a rule in behavioral psychology and communication science called the 738-55 rule. And that rule states that 7% of the meaning transmitted in the things we're communicating are the words that we choose. What I'm choosing to say to you, my vocabulary, the sentence structure, things like that. The 38% of it comes from my intonation and my inflection. So that's me. Am I ending every sentence with a question mark? Like I have no idea what I'm talking about? Or am I coming down forcefully?
Yeah, you never talk like that.
No, I don't. And not only that, I emphasize specific words inside of a sentence that I want to put focus on. I will emphasize action words. I will come down at the end of a sentence. I will draw out syllables to bring emphasis to things because I'm communicating conviction when I say these things. Now, I do it implicitly. I'm not necessarily doing it intentionally all the time, but you read that when
did you learn that? I'm curious.
Well, a really interesting thing is, if anyone's ever had the opportunity to do this, is I've been extensively media trained. So if you ever go on the road and you're raising money for a company or something like that, often, or you start doing a lot of TV interviews, like you obviously do a lot of this stuff, you'll get media trained where you have someone come in and they'll actually videotape you and they'll ask you questions and they'll play back your responses. And like game tape watching an NFL game, they'll like circle things and be like, see, we did this thing. This means this, don't do that. And by forcing myself to look at what I'm saying on a regular basis, it makes you hyper aware when you're doing things that make it less likely for someone to believe you or betray the point that you're making, reduce the sense of communicated conviction. So that's a super helpful way of getting to some of that stuff.
Yeah, that's great. Definitely, in fact, I'm going to write down media training in my little to-do thing.
So in a negotiation, your body is often communicating for you. So 7% of the meaning of the things that I'm communicating are the words I choose. 38% of it is my inflection. And then 55% of it is your body language, the nonverbal communication cues that you were just mentioning. And so when I'm talking to you, am I closing my body language, meaning am I crossing my arms? Am I protecting my vital organs? There's the fig leaf where sometimes people cross their hands and put it in their lap, covering their genitals. That's one of the most frequent things little kids do when they're in trouble. They kind of cover themselves up. There was a woman that I knew years ago who was a charisma coach, And she focused very heavily on teaching women how to take up more physical space in boardroom environments, because how much physical space you take up communicates the level of confidence that you have implicitly.
Right.
So women often, when they're sitting, they will cross their legs, they'll put their hands in their lap, and they'll lean forward. That's making themselves as small as they can possibly make themselves. Whereas you look at like a male CEO of a company, his hands are behind his head, his feet are up on the desk. He's taking up a ludicrous amount of space. It's like, and I hate this term, but man spreading on like public transit.
Sure.
That's a dominance play in some sense.
Right. Yeah. And then you can tell who read about it somewhere and is now doing a lot of it because they are taking up space in a way where they're clearly uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because they're stretched out so far.
Yeah. Like,
There's
this
no
is
way.
too much.
Yeah. It's too much. Yeah. And you know, interestingly, I actually, back in the 90s when I lived in the former East Germany, a friend of mine and I were in West Germany on a trip. And he goes, you know, you can always tell East Germans from West Germans by the way they sit. Mm-hmm. And I said, what? What are you talking about? I'd never heard of nonverbal communication at this point. Yeah. You know, I was 17 years old. And he goes, yeah, look at these two guys. And they were like really spread out, arm across the other chair. You know, they had their stuff on another chair. They had taken up this whole table of four chairs with two guys. And I said, oh, okay, whatever, maybe. And then he goes, go ask them where they're from. And I said, well, that's going to be weird. I can't start a conversation with a stranger. And he goes, do it in English. They won't care. All right, you're right. Hey, where are you guys from? Germany? Yeah, we're from Munich. Have you been there? You know, have you been there? And I'm like, okay, you were right. But then he kept doing this, and he would see a guy on a train, like a tram, and the guy would be sitting there with his legs forward, his hands in his lap, his shoulders forward, and just looking straight forward. Yeah. And he'd go, I bet that guy's from East Germany. And I went, no way. And he goes up and he asks him, and he goes, sir, where are you from? And he goes, oh, you know, I'm from Halle in East Germany. And he goes, yeah. And he just kept doing that. And I thought, this is so interesting, because not only is it a gender thing, cultures will teach people to behave in a certain way. So Americans, manspreading is inherently a Western thing, not just a guy thing.
Our spurs are jangling when we walk in there. Right?
That's right. You go to Asia, there's not a lot of manspreading going on. There's maybe different things happening, of course.
Totally. And you know, often in body language, it's less important what people are specifically doing. What we're mentioning here are broad-based cues that are useful to know. But in reality, it's also deviation from the baseline. So people will tell you when you're either developing poker reads on people at a poker table, it's not specific things that they're doing, but it's what things they're doing that are deviations from the norm. Oh, you're doing this thing, but you've never done that before. What does that mean? Something must have changed for you. Paying attention to things like that can be very useful in an environment like that. But in negotiations day to day or in conversations, people are constantly telegraphing their emotions to you. And once you start paying attention to stuff, people are screaming to tell you how they're feeling at any given moment through their eye contact or lack thereof, touching the face, the neck, putting your hands through your hair, closed body language like crossing your arms or covering your vital organs. All these things communicate that I'm uncomfortable, that I am maybe lacking confidence in some sense, that I am in a troubled state. Now, some people are always like that because they're naturally very nervous. So again, you have to compare to the baseline. But a broad-based average, good thing to pay attention to. Another thing that's really important to call out is the difference between men and women. So when men talk to each other, like when you and I talk to each other, let's say we're at a party, we're never facing each other directly. Men don't do that.
That's pretty rare,
to a man, that's like super confrontational, like squared shoulders, direct eye contact. I'm going to fight you. That's what that is.
It's a little intense, even if it's a friendly conversation.
Yeah.
I think highly charismatic people do it a lot, but it's also kind of an intimidation thing. It's like
it's a power play. Yeah, it's really hard to play. So men, notice this next time you walk to a party or a networking event. When men are talking to each other, like Jordan or I, we're sitting diagonal to each other at an angle, both facing out towards the room. Typically, our arms are crossed or we're holding a drink or something like that. That's position number one for men talking to each other in public. There are, and not only that, men don't have physical contact between each other when we're talking. I don't talk to Jordan and like stroke him on the arm when I make an important point, but women who are friends with each other will constantly touch each other. They'll touch each other's hair. There are friends that I've had, dudes, for like 30 years that I've never physically touched. Like,
it would not occur to me to touch any part of your above the neckline.
Exactly.
I might pat you on the arm or the back. That's probably the max. Oh, we hug when we see each other, but that's kind of it, right?
And we're really uncomfortable doing it. We just know we have to.
It's just a
social. We care about each other.
Go up and hug it. Give Alex a hug now. Go up and do it. You can do it, Jordan. It's okay.
Exactly. But it's not something that men do very frequently. So
true.
Often this causes friction between the sexes because men talk to women like men talk to men. And that's a problem because women like direct contact. When they talk to each other, they commonly square shoulders. They get closer than men do when they're talking to each other. They will touch each other. So when men are talking to women, You can't talk to a woman like you talk to a man. You should give her direct contact, square shoulders. I wouldn't necessarily recommend you touch people because especially in a work environment, that's super dicey and really risky.
Hashtag me too.
Right. Well, specific hashtag like violation. Don't do that.
Yeah. Hashtag sexual harassment in pretty much any situation.
Exactly. So don't necessarily do that, but do square shoulders. Another thing is that if a woman is talking to a man and you square shoulders the man, that can be seen as direct confrontation if you volunteer that type of behavior. So for men, many times women are a mirror for all of our insecurities. Being judged by a woman is basically the sum total of our existence. Not to be too reductive, but in many ways it is. So when women are very confrontational to men, when they talk to men like they talk to other women, that can be extremely insecurity producing for men or bring it out because, again, it feels confrontational to us. So I see this commonly. There's a lot of disconnects between the genders. So in negotiations, in interpersonal communication, you need to pay very close attention to how other people are reacting to the things that you're saying. Are they shutting down? Are they touching their face or neck or hair when you're talking to them? And then modulate your approach accordingly. Step it back, maybe.
Okay. All right. We've talked about a lot of poker mindsets, poker mentalities that come into play with negotiation. Is there anything else from that game that falls into the negotiation realm?
Oh, yeah, so many things. But one of the most important things that I learned from playing a lot of poker is that, especially if you play tournament play, is that if you treat each hand as a life and death situation, as a really important event in and of itself, you're going to burn yourself out in a matter of minutes and you're going to make a lot of shitty decisions because you're emotionally compromising yourself continuously as you play the game. In poker, you have to adopt the mindset that if I lose a hand, it doesn't really matter, especially if you play the hand correctly. Then you can't feel bad about it at all. Because in the long run, the better poker player will win more than they will lose. In like an average game between a very junior poker player and a professional, the junior poker player has almost a coin flip chance at winning any individual hand, but exploded out over thousands or tens of thousands of hand, the poker player has a very slight edge, but gets magnified to an extreme difference in outcomes between the amateur and the professional because they adopt this mentality, again, that each hand doesn't kill me. Each hand is just another hand. There's another hand after it. So we have to make sure that we don't fall into quicksand, and that's true with negotiations. If I negotiate for a job offer and I don't get exactly what I want and I don't end up taking that job, don't feel bad that it didn't work out. Feel good that you negotiated. Feel good that you took the shot and walk away into your next opportunity to negotiate feeling like you're doing the right thing as opposed to building up all these mental barriers for why I don't want to do this again. So again, adopt that poker mindset that no matter what the outcome of a negotiation is, the fact that I did it was the right thing.
Perfect.
Yeah, so the second part of this email, the second sentence in this paragraph, and the whole purpose of this email is, as I'm doing that, it would be helpful to know if there's any flexibility in the terms. Now, what I'm doing here is asking a very simple question. I'm not actually asking for anything. I'm just asking if there's any flexibility. Now, remember we talked before about making the other side reactive? That's what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
I'm changing the pace of the negotiation. I'm painting them into a corner. Because what are their outcomes now? Let's game theory the situation out. They can say yes, or they can say no, or they can say some variant of each one of them. If they say yes, then they're inviting me and asking me for my counter.
Yes.
Which is huge. Now they're making me reactive. So again, we've changed the perceived leverage in the conversation. They could say no, which very rarely happens because that's going to sound super unreasonable.
Right.
What do you mean there's no flexibility at all? This is a job offer scenario. This is a conversation. Everybody negotiates jobs.
I'm guessing that they would say something like, well, what did you have in mind?
Exactly.
Right.
So typically the response is something to the effect of, we think this is a really fair offer, but what would you...
We're
what are your
open to
expectations?
ideas. Yeah.
Exactly. So
Be
at that
willing to
point,
hear
they're
you out.
asking you for your counter.
Great.
And that's really the magic of this email and the whole purpose for sending it. Because then once you send it, you get their initial response, like what we just said, and you see who you're talking to. Typically, it's some variant of, we think this is a really fair offer, but... And then you come back with your response. So this is another email here. Again, only a couple sentences. Bob, I appreciate the consideration of the offer. I'm very excited about the team, the product, and the direction of the company. I know I can make a big impact on the organization. Based on other opportunities I'm looking at, I feel X is a fair number for what I can bring to this role. If you can match that, I'm ready to sign today and we'll give my notice tomorrow. Look forward to your response. So what's happening here? So let's unpack it a little bit as well.
Okay. We use the first name. Got
name.
it. We have the nice little, what do you call it? Cultural courtesy. I appreciate the consideration of the offer.
The 10
Check.
things.
And then I'm very excited about the team, the product, the direction of the company. I know I can make a big impact on the organization. Sounds like you're saying Not only that you're interested in it, but that you realize you have some value to offer?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
It's just a powerful thing to say. And then comes the really important part. And again, these 2 sentences are the entire strategy behind this negotiation. First is, based on other opportunities I'm looking at, I feel X is a fair number for what I can bring to the role. Now, what are we doing there? Typically, what we're doing here is we are displaying, again, social proof and market validation. Not based on other offers I have, based on other opportunities I'm looking at. You can also say based on the market rate if you don't want to use opportunities, although I would say opportunities is the stronger play. I'm looking at, I feel X is a fair number.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, social proof and market validation. I'm not saying I would like this, I want this would make me happy. I'm saying based on other opportunities I'm looking at, X is a fair number for what I can bring to this position.
Yeah, that difference, that subtle difference makes sense, right? Because it's not that you're unhappy with it. It's that, look, I have other evidence, concrete evidence that I'm worth more than what you'd offered.
And the real war of this, the battle of this, is fought in the subtlety. It's not big, wide-ranging things that change the outcome of negotiations. It's small, little things like this. Now, if this kind of stuff doesn't come naturally to you, use the script that we're providing you here. This is a great place to start. Or write the email yourself and then have other people read it. Don't introduce it to them. Just say, how does this come off? What's the tone here? What do you expect? Some people, this kind of thing comes naturally to. Many of us, it doesn't. And if it doesn't, don't be afraid to ask other people what their opinion is.
Very cool. So what is the X in this case? You said 12 to, was it 12% or something? Am I imagining that?
Yeah, no, that's right. So typically I recommend people counter with 12 to 15% when using this strategy because that's inside of that allowable budget. Remember, again, if they're in the low to middle of their allowable range, 12 to 15% puts you right at the top of that range almost all the time.
Okay.
Now, I will say as a caveat, some of this changes if you're negotiating a very senior position like a C-level or VP level or senior director position. In that situation, you may have more flexibility because those positions tend to be more harder to hire for, basically.
Sure. Yeah, you hear stories all the time like, well, I was working at MIT and then I had dinner with Mark Zuckerberg and he handed me an offer that was 10 times what I'm currently making.
Right.
So I took the job.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, well, if you're going from government or academia to
rocket ship startup,
then this is going to be different. And also, if you're in that situation, what would you recommend? What if someone is negotiating C-suite stuff? Not how would they do it, but are there coaches they can hire for this? It seems like there should be. That's a professional's job. Hey, I need an executive compensation package negotiated with Oracle.
Yeah, I mean, some people use employment lawyers. In some cases, their personal lawyers can help them navigate if they're really complex agreements. But the truth is, it ends up being people that get to that level typically have been around the block enough to know generally what they're looking for. So they have a better sense of context. Again, if you're right out of college, it's harder to establish that context. So these rules of thumb are very useful for most situations. But for the very senior ones as well, often it's salary, but it's also stock or equity, control terms, board seat, all kinds of things.
Sure. Okay. And then last but not least, you said in the example, if you can match that, I'm ready to sign today and I will give my notice tomorrow.
Yeah.
What's going on there?
So that's such a power play. So remember we talked before about helping people visualize the win? Mm-hmm. If the car salesman knows that he's going to get a deal that day, is more likely to give you what you want or what you're asking for. That's exactly what we're doing here. And this is the most important part of this email, the social proofing and the number that you're giving, you just need to do that. That's got to be there. But the most important part tactically is this part. If you can match that, I'm ready to sign my day today and we'll give my notice tomorrow. This presents a slam dunk on a silver platter, if it's even possible to do those two things, to the HR rep on the other side of the phone. That means, again, remember, they want the negotiation to end. Put yourself in their position, right? So let's say you interviewed with 5 or 6 people on the team. At $180 or $200 an hour total cost for an employee's time, not to mention the opportunity cost of them not working on other things that would be valuable to the company, they've invested a lot of money in giving you this offer. And the entire team signed off on you. The manager, who probably outranks this HR person, gave you the go-ahead, and now they hand it off to this person to get you in the door. That's a high-pressure situation for that HR rep, because now it's up to them to screw this up or bring you in the door. They're really in kind of almost like a no-win scenario here. Yeah. It's just a really tough spot for them to be in. So this is where the empathy comes in again. Imagine yourself on their side of the table. So if you can say, you know what, I'm in the door tomorrow and happy for this number if you do this thing, they will be willing to pay more because they see that end really close.
Yeah, I think also, just from my perspective, having done a bunch of negotiation with advertisers and things like that, saying, if we can do this, I'll sign right now and we'll get going. Yeah. That lets me know that, or me letting them know, I'm not going to then pull some other thing out of the sky that you then have to contend with.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go, thanks, good. Now that we're there, I want this other thing. And now there's this, it's done.
Yeah.
I'm done. This is the thing that I want. There's not going to be 10 other things. This isn't going to take 3 more weeks.
Yep.
It could be over by 5 p.m. if you get back to me today.
And again, bird in the hand worth 2 in the bush. That's exactly what's happening here. A lot of the things that we're talking about today, kind of in this go through here, is that it's a lot of wisdom that your grandfather, your great grandmother would know that we're just applying here very tactically for a specific purpose. But these are not groundbreaking concepts. They're just applied to this situation.
Right. Okay, great.
Yeah. And then basically I look forward to your response, power close that email, send it off. Now, the vast majority of the time that I've seen this employed, roughly 70 to 78% of the time, the job offer is done at that point. They say yes, and it's over. There are rare situations, kind of in that 20 to 30% or so, where they'll come back and say, well, we can't do that, but we can counter with this. It tends to be less than what you asked. Often when you ask, let's just say you asked for a 10K increase, they'll come back with 5K. Or 7K. They typically come back with half, or in some cases less than half of what you requested if they're going to counter. And be prepared for that. That's always very possible. It's unlikely in situations like this, again, if you are over-optimizing for ending the negotiation quickly. But then you have the opportunity to counter one more time, and then you enter what we talked about before, the danger zone, where you're beginning to test the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
There are situations where you can negotiate multiple times past that. It's easier to do that at a senior level, but at most levels, you're beginning to kind of test the social fabric a little bit too much. So then after your last counter, they give you a response, and I would say you either accept it or you walk away in the vast majority of cases.
Great. Okay. So to review some of these major points, and again, this will be in the worksheets for this episode in the show notes, never make the first offer. Always be thankful, gracious, etc. Setting a positive and passionate tone for the negotiation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's right.
Displaying the market validation, the social proof to make sure that they know you're in demand.
Right.
You know, you're not just relying on them. Set your ask. Help them visualize the win, a.k.a. Happy Friday, we hired him. And then reiterate interest, close strong,
Bingo.
make it rain.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
All right.
Just a couple things to qualify here. So there are different types of negotiations, but I use a job offer scenario because it's most common to all of us.
Sure.
But all the things that Jordan just mentioned, you can use in every single one of your negotiations. The social proof, the market validation, right? I mean, the visualizing the win, the setting the ask, all these things are core concepts that, again, work in every kind of negotiation applied to a job offer scenario. Now, for more complex things like business-to-business deals, basic negotiation tenets and rules still apply, but there's a couple key differences. The back and forth can be endless. The amount of pre-work that you have to do is significantly higher than it would be for a job offer scenario. BD or business development has very different metrics by which the people that you're talking to are being evaluated. In a job offer scenario, the HR rep, it's either gets you in the door or doesn't get you in the door at a rate that's inside budget or outside budget. It's a very small bounded number of things. Again, business development, kind of business-to-business deal side of things, it's much more complex. There's a lot more back and forth. Deals can take 8 months, years to close, depending on the complexity of the industry that you're in. And there's a lot more options, just way more things to negotiate. But again, same basic negotiation tenets still apply.
I remember a while ago you told me that you negotiated a mattress. Sounds really exciting.
Yeah.
I know you've bought cars, motorcycles, but the mattress was by far your favorite purchase.
Oh, mattresses are the best. In my opinion, that's like in the day-to-day trenches, like the Olympics of negotiating, because the deck is so stacked in your favor for a negotiating situation. It's fantastic.
Really? For mattresses?
Yeah, for mattresses. So no one really knows this, but the entire mattress industry, and there's a reason it's being disrupted right now by companies like Casper and others, is an entire industry built to fuck you, basically. You walk into these stores, and they all sell basically the same products. In many cases, the exact same product, but they will call them different things, give them different serial numbers, different brand names, different tags, colors, everything, just to make it harder for you to compare it and shop offers around. They also do a lot of kind of schlocky sales stuff, like there'll always be balloons outside of a mattress store. Notice this when you're driving past one next. It's always like some crazy time of the month where there's always a rebate. They try every trick in the book from a sales perspective to get you to buy. And the other best part about it is that the vast majority of people that I've talked to don't negotiate mattresses or don't even know that they can. But these are products that have, and I'm not exaggerating, hundreds of % markup on top of the wholesale cost that the
I met a guy who was a mattress manufacturer, and he was probably one of the richest guys I've ever met in my life.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. It is a pure margin business, which makes it super fun to negotiate. So I'll walk through an actual example of this. So, bought my girlfriend a mattress recently, and we went through and found an area. And for some reason, everything is always like this, but all the mattress stores cluster themselves around each other. So if you find like one mattress store, there's like 6 within like a 5-mile radius. But for some reason, they're always in the same general place.
That's so strange.
Yeah, I don't know why. But if you're in San Francisco, Van Ness Street here, Van Ness Avenue, is basically exactly that. There's about 5 mattress stores within like a couple blocks of each other. So anyway, she and I go to the first place, and she lays down on a bed. We go around, look at different ones. She's like, okay, find the one you want. She finds the one she likes. Mattress guy comes over. He leads into his whole schlocky sales routine. Oh, what a beautiful couple. Oh my God, you guys are gonna have the most beautiful kids. I'm like, why don't you cut that bullshit with that?
Yeah.
He goes, no, you
We're
remind
gonna
me.
be doing it on this mattress.
That's
if you
right.
Play your cards right.
He's like, you look so beautiful. He's like, oh, you guys like this. He would try and find shared interests. He tries and humanize himself. How long you guys lived out here? You live together? Nope. What's gonna happen? I can tell. I can feel real love. Like the whole just bullshit line. And so she finds the one she likes, and the first mattress she looks at, or that she seriously likes, is $1,800. I'm like, wow, that's expensive.
Those are some expensive kids.
Yeah, some expensive materials there. So we go, okay, fine. The first thing I do immediately, and everybody should do this, go to Google. Go to Google and just Google the price of that mattress, because every mattress place, for the most part, in addition to places like Best Buy, they all do price matching. So if you can find a publicly advertised price, they'll immediately match that price. So if you're uncomfortable negotiating, you don't want to do it, just show them to hold up the phone and be like, it's $1,500 over here. And so they'll immediately match that price. So that's the first thing I do. So we started at $1,800, and I immediately find it online for $1,200. And I'm like, well, will you guys match this price? He goes, oh, I don't know. Let me talk to my manager, and goes to the whole schlocky thing, goes in the back room. Yeah. He's probably playing Galaga or like ping pong or smoking a cigarette or something like that, drinking a beer. Comes back out after an appropriate amount of time to like make me believe that he really considered it. He goes, well, my manager didn't like it, but okay, we're going to do it. I'm like, that's not even close. And I go, but if you reach our price, we're going to buy today, right? Visualize the win. And he goes, all right. I'm like, what can you do? And he goes, all right, break my balls. Okay, all right, fine. 1,100. And I'm like, not even close. And I'm like, will you throw in a box spring with that? Okay, fine, I'll throw in a box. What about a bed frame? Okay, fine. She doesn't need either of these things, but he'll throw it in. All right, what about free delivery? Okay, fine, you're breaking my balls, fine. And I'm like, 1,100 is just not going to do it. Will you do that minus 10%? Well, what if I pay cash? Well, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this. I'm going to walk out and I'm going to find it somewhere else. Okay, hold on a second. So after all this is beating this guy back, like my mom did with the Isuzu Trooper, I get him down to $1,050.
All right.
So we started at $1,800. These are real numbers. Now we're at $1,050. And I go, you know what? Fuck you. I'm out of here. And I leave. And I go to the next
I hope
place.
you don't really say that.
No. I was very polite. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. But
Right,
I
okay,
mean,
just
obviously,
check.
in my mind, fudge.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, we go to the next place, and I find the exact same mattress. I had to Google it because it's a different brand name and a different serial number. And we go over, and it's $1,800. I'm like, listen, I just came from a place, and they're going to do this for $1,050. You got to beat that. And I go through the same rigmarole with the other guy. Will you do that minus 10%? What if I pay cash? I'm going to buy this today. You got to do better. Give us a deeper blah, blah, blah. Get them all the way down to $850. Now, we started at $1,800.
Jeez,
and I get this guy down to $850.
$1,000 plus a free box spring and delivery.
Exactly. With that, it's over $1,000. But I'm $950 down from where I started. And I go, you know what? That's not going to do it. And I walk out and go to the next place. So I go to the third place, and we find the same mattress. And I go, listen, guys, I just got this exact same mattress down to $850 another place. If you're going to beat that price, I'll buy here today. So we do the whole thing with them. We do that minus 10%, same thing. Now, at this point, my girlfriend can't even look at me. She's so embarrassed to be around me. She goes off in the bathroom, and I'm like putting the screws to this guy, just like my mom did. And I eventually get this guy down to like $750. And then I call the place that I just came from before, and I put him on speakerphone in front of this other guy, at which point my girlfriend completely disowns me and leaves.
Right. She's like, I'll pick you up
exactly.
after you're
And she's driving down 101, starting a life in a new city. And I'm like, listen, I'm over at this place now. You gave me the price $850 before. I've already got this guy down to $750. Which one of you beats that right now, I'm going to buy the mattress right now, cash.
They're on speakerphone.
They're on
negotiating
speakerphone
against each other.
These guys can't even believe it. And I actually kind of feel bad for them as well.
Yeah. They're like, I never wanted to work here in the first place. Yeah.
So anyway, we get the exact mattress we wanted, that place for $700 out the door. We're done, including tax and everything.
Wow.
So we basically saved $1,100 just by going through the same basic tactics at every single place. So when you're in these situations,
What'd you do with the box spring and the bed frame she didn't need?
Yeah, so we ended up using them, but in the past I've sold them. Like I've done it for myself, for my brother. We just sell them. We don't need them.
So you just knock it down
Yeah.
even further.
But so we'll put these in kind of the show notes. So you can put it up later. But we say things like there's a script of things you can read. And in my students in my class, you don't have to love the brawl this as much as I do. I'm taking like sick pleasure when I'm going
Yeah,
through
you're
doing this.
clearly, the speakerphone thing was like, okay, all right, come on.
Yeah, they're like, they're dying and I'm loving it. And
Yeah.
I'm like feeding on it. I'm like, yes, more strength. This is fantastic.
Yeah.
But most people don't feel that way. Most people hate it.
Mom would be so proud.
She would. Well, she'd be ashamed because she would have done it for $6.50.
Yeah.
But yeah, my mom didn't raise any sissies. But anyway, the point is, in my class, I give people just a list of things to say, and this will be in the show notes. But what's your best out the door price? Well, you do that minus 10%. If you reach my price, I'll buy today. I'm on the phone with X and they have it advertised at this. Will you match it? If I buy here, will you throw in this? There's a good guy discount, which is something I know I learned from you years ago. But
Really? The good guy discount.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
I hadn't heard that one before you.
The good guy discount.
Or like the local discount too.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But the whole point is you don't have to be tactically a genius in negotiations. Just try saying some of these things out. So print them out, put them on your phone, and just try reading them off. And students of mine who've been really uncomfortable negotiating in the past have done this and just gone in and said these things. And they come back and go, I just saved $800. I'm like, I know. It's
like,
so easy. Just
Cut me a
ask.
check. Yeah, that's great.
I mean, if, again, all the way back to like that rationalization, if I can rationalize myself asking for the things I want, the tactics in cases like this are super, super simple. So just try them out, see what happens.
Yeah, I guess that whole margin on something like a mattress, motorcycle belongs to, in part, the salesman and the rest probably to the dealership. So he's playing in part with house money, but also really wants to make the sale.
Exactly.
And knows that you have options and hopes that you don't realize that.
Exactly, yeah. And again, if these people, and this is one reason I never feel bad about situations like this, if they sell me a mattress or anything, they are making money on the deal, no matter what they say.
Right.
They don't sell things at a loss. They're not doing things for a favor. If they sell it to you, they're making money off it, no matter what they say. So again, all the way back to what we talked about before, you have a fiduciary responsibility to maximize your personal value in situations like this. Either you're going to get taken or they are. You're going to get a good deal or they are. And you need to protect yourself in your own self-interest. So find your rationalization that helps you do that. Whether it's every price is a fudge you price, thinking about foregone revenue, thinking about what Beyonce would do or somebody else, get yourself over that hump, then just try some of these things and you'll be amazed how it works.
Thank you so much. This is truly a masterclass in negotiation, and we're going to do some advanced stuff soon enough.
Yeah.
Even more.
Yeah, we're going to get into the deep psychology of things. Because what we talked about today are all the tactics of specifically how you negotiate. But the truth is most people don't even get to a place where they can adequately employ these tactics because there's so many things that stop them from getting to a place where they can try that. So in another show, whole other conversation, we'll deeply examine kind of the psychological aspects of negotiations and how we can fight those impulses that stop us from asking for the things that we want.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Alex.
Thanks, man.